Date is May 17th, 2022. At this time, I'd like to invite you to join us in a silent moment of prayer, followed by the oath of allegiance to the flag of our country. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, I'm required to state that adequate notice of this meeting has been provided indicating the time and place of the meeting in accordance with Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of 1975 by advertising a notice in the Star Ledger and the Express Times and by posting a copy on the bulletin board in the municipal building. May I have a roll call, please?
Member Farmer? Member Coyle?
Here.
Member Murillo?
Here.
Member Polito?
Here.
Member Sazanov?
Here.
Member Weeks?
Here.
Mayor Mangucci?
Here.
Vice Chairman Sampson?
Here.
Chairman Van Vliet?
Here. Okay, well, we'll move right on to the old business for the evening, and it's the NFI Real Estate LLC. They're here for a preliminary major site plan application with bulk variance relief for 188 Strikers Road, Block 99, lots 3.01 and 6. This is continuation of the hearing from last September, I believe.
Yeah. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the board for hosting this special meeting and for coming out on your birthday. But for the record, my name is Mark Peck. I'm an attorney with the Florio Perucci Law Firm on behalf of the applicant, NFI Real Estate LLC. And as the chairman indicated, we're here to continue our hearing, which began actually on May 26th of last year, was continued to September 22nd, and now we're here this evening. I believe that the hearing has been properly noticed, and we're free to proceed. And as the chairman also indicated, I do want to note that we have amended our application. We're now only seeking preliminary major site plan approval with some bulk variance relief. And I'll also note that pursuant to NJSA 40:55D-46A, plans and other documents for a preliminary site plan application only need to be in a tentative form. Everything then gets finalized during the final approval process. And the appellate division actually confirmed that in the case Toll Brothers versus your neighbor Greenwich Township back in 1990. But regarding this application, the board and the public raised some site questions at the earlier hearings, primarily relating to sewer and buffers, and some of that was relating to the then pending bridge application next door, which has since been approved. But to best address these questions and concerns, and to offer the best possible plan to the board, the adjacent Lot 2, the very plastic site, has been incorporated into the site plan to accommodate access to and from the site and also to provide sewer capacity. And the testimony you're going to hear tonight will also show how the applicant has enhanced the buffering on the overlook facing side of the property as well. And as some time has elapsed since we've last been here, to refresh, NFI is seeking to construct a 592,800 square foot warehouse, which would include 17,500 square feet of office space, along with associated improvements at lots 2 and 3.01 in block 99, which is also known as 188 Stryker Road. That's a landlocked, lot 3.01 is a landlocked 46.75 acre parcel in the ROM zone district, where it is a permitted use. We'd originally proposed access to this landlocked site via a 50-foot wide easement across lot 6, which is the bridge site. But we've now amended the plan, and you're going to hear plenty of testimony about that, so that access will now run through the lot 2 buried plastic site. And largely as a consequence of the lot's landlocked status, we're seeking several variances. The first is from section 243-63D, which requires lot frontage to be on a public street. Lot 3.01 lacks that. And likewise, Section 243-75E requires a minimum of 300 feet of street frontage. And again, this landlocked parcel doesn't have any street frontage. So those variances would be needed for any attempt to develop that property, because otherwise the lot would be just zoned in utility. We're also seeking a variance pursuant to Section 243-75D2, which has to do with the landscape buffers on all non-street lot lines. We do have some gaps and encroachments. We're seeking several design waivers as well from Section 243-46C1B, which requires the driveway apron to have a maximum width of 40 feet. Ours is proposed to be 143 feet 7 inches. From Section 243-48B5, which would require sidewalks internally to the site. And from Section 243-48B6A and B, which has to do with the fire aisles, the width, 30 feet required, we're proposing 24 feet, and some parking proposed adjacent to the front facade of the building. And finally, a waiver from 243-48B7A, where the driveway is supposed to have a maximum 6% grade and only 4% within 100 feet of an intersecting street. We exceed that only at the apron slope and near Stryker's Road. Anyway, at our earlier hearing, our site engineer, Kyle McKenna, our traffic engineer, John Wichner, and our planner, Andrew Janu, testified. Kyle and John are here tonight, as is Mr. Janu's colleague, Barbara Elin. Michael Landsberg of NFI also testified, and he'll be our first witness tonight. And we plan to have him testify first as to what NFI has done as a consequence of the prior hearings and the comments that we've heard and the efforts that they've made to address some of these comments. Then Kyle McKenna will testify, give, again, an overview of the site, which we've given a lot of testimony on already, but he'll really focus on the changes, obviously, that we've made since we were last here, and also, the tweaks to address the comments. John Wichner will, of course, give updated traffic testimony, primarily related to access in and out of the site because of the driveway. Much of the other information will be the same. And then Barbara Elin, again, will review the proofs of the variances, put testimony on about the variances. The last time we've lost a few variances since the last time we were here, but there have been some changes to the plan, so she'll review the proofs for that. So, without any further ado, I'd like to call our first witness, Mr. Landsberg.
Mr. Peck, and Mr. Chairman, if I may, before we do that,
Yes,
just
sir.
a few housekeeping items from the board side of things. Notice was provided by the board. The notice is deemed sufficient for this meeting. I did it personally myself. Number two, there are some different faces that you see on the board than were here, I think, in September of last year. All of the members have listened to the tape, reviewed the transcripts. They have submitted certifications as to same.
Great.
And if, I don't know if you require counsel, we would certainly affirm it on the record, but I think that with the certifications by two Beth Dilts, that should be sufficient.
Yes, I agree.
And
thank
then
you.
finally, just so council is aware, according to my notes, I think that the last exhibit that was introduced at the hearing was A18, which was a proposed buffer screening exhibit. I think that, I just want to make sure that
I think
accurate.
that sounds correct.
Okay. That's all I have, council. Thank you.
Great. Well, Mr. Landsberg? He was previously sworn. I don't know if you would.
We're going to re-swear him.
Yeah, it's been some time.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state your name, spell your last for the record.
Sure. It's Michael Landsberg. Last name is Landsburg.
Thank you, Mr. Landsberg.
Mr. Landsberg, you work for NFI?
I do, yes. I'm the Chief Development Officer for NFI. I've been with the company for 17 years. And as Mark mentioned, he gave a brief summary of some updates from about a year ago when we first came in front of this board. And I thought, just given the time that has passed, I would explain a little bit about why we made some of the changes. We're going to get into the details with, as Mark mentioned, with our professionals, but from the contract purchaser's perspective, I would just give that background and in light of the crowd that maybe hasn't been at some of the prior meetings as well. So NFI, for background, we're the largest privately held family-owned supply chain company in North America. We operate throughout the U.S. and Canada, about 70 million feet, have about 15,000 employees, and develop these buildings all over the country. We are, as I mentioned, privately held and long-term owners. So as we go into communities, we are not a development firm that comes in, builds a building, sells it, leaves, moves on. Many times we operate within our buildings ourselves as the tenant. Sometimes we lease them out to unrelated companies, third-party tenants, names that you know, Fortune 1000 companies. And we took into account a lot of the feedback that we received through these meetings, both from the board, its professionals, and the public. And we've made some modifications. As Mark mentioned, we're coming in just for preliminary tonight. And with some of these modifications, we are hopeful that they will be received favorably in order to move forward with the project. I'll be here to answer questions in more detail as we go. But given some new faces on this board, Mr. Bryce, as you mentioned, and the public, I thought important to give a little bit of background from our perspective. And I mentioned we're the contract purchaser. The Deschler Dicker family has owned this parcel for many, many years, generations, I believe. There are some representatives from the family in the audience. And we are hopeful that should this project go forward, we would be able to move forward with the purchase of the land and construct the project. We did acquire the adjacent Berry Plastics property in order to pursue and solve some of the questions that have been raised in terms of access and sewer.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Lansbury?
Yes, Mr. Lansbury, you say you represent NFI, and the original property that you proposed to purchase, the original 46 acres, and now I understand that someone's also purchased the old, what we refer to as Berry Plastic, but it actually was Stag Industries, and then RFI, I guess it was, that owned the property. Well, who owns it now?
An NFI entity acquired it.
Is it a different corporation? Is it a corporation that's working?
Same. So we have different real estate entities that will acquire these properties, but the same group that has the original 46 acres is the same owners of what we call the Berry Plastics building. It's a company, the family is, unfortunately, it's not my family, but I've been there a long time and they treat me all right. It is three brothers that own the company, and those three brothers, it's the same ownership group that acquired Berry Plastics and that has the Deschler farm under agreement.
Are there separate like LLCs?
Separate LLCs, correct. It will ultimately be one LLC, but we haven't acquired the Deschler farm yet. That's not our property at this point. We are the contract purchaser.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, and happy birthday.
Well, thank you very much. Wasn't supposed to be the point of,
We're having a big party for you.
please don't. Okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to clarify that because it may make a difference on some of our questions we would have later. Thank you.
Sure.
Public.
Okay. Anyone from the public have questions of this gentleman? That's it. Yep.
Donna Schneider, 26 Meadowview Drive. I just have a question. So you now own Berry Plastics, or Stag as it's called, correct?
Of course, so we bought it from Stag.
You bought it from Stag, okay. And you're asking for a preliminary major site plan change with the purchase of a whole new property and a whole new building? Is that what you're asking for this evening?
That is.
Okay. That's all I want to know. Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none? Public portion is closed for that witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to next call Mr. Kyle McKenna. You're going to need to be sworn in again.
Just for the record. Do you swear affirm that the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state your name and spell your last for the record.
Sure, it's Kyle McKenna, McKenna.
Kyle, can you briefly, even though you've already been accepted as an expert in the field of civil engineering by the board, could you just, give a quick overview of who you are and what it is that you do?
Sure, my name is, again, Kyle McKenna. I represent Bowler Engineering. Our address is 30 Independence Boulevard in Warren, New Jersey. I have a Bachelor's of Science degree in Civil Engineering from Rutgers University. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey and have been accepted by several municipalities throughout the state to provide professional testimony. My license is current in good standing.
And you've been involved with the plans for NFI for this particular site from the beginning, correct?
Correct.
And all the various iterations of the plan and all that?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt, but if I may, I'm just attending for the first time this evening. My name is Don Shaw. I'm an attorney in Flemington, New Jersey, appearing for Overlook Condominium Development. May I have just a brief voir. This is the first meeting I've attended. I became aware of this project literally last Monday. And I just wanted to clarify with regard to some sound issues. Very brief and targeted.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McKenna, have you been accepted as an expert in the field of acoustical engineering before any municipal board?
No.
And it's the same question in terms of your appearance before any municipal board previously and your acceptance as an expert to give testimony. Noise technology,
Not specifically, no.
sound or vibration control,
No.
any environmental acoustic area accepted as an expert.
No.
Thank you.
If I may,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah. Mr. McKenna, all those items that Mr. Scholl just recited, are those features of most commercial or industrial developments?
Yes.
Are those features that you encounter in the course of your daily planning of these types of developments?
Yes.
These are something that are these are all features that are commonly encountered and dealt with by civil engineers in preparing site plans.
Yes.
Thank you.
I was just wondering, you are actually representing the Overlook Development in Humboldt?
That's correct.
Okay. Are you going to be asking the pointed questions of any of their witnesses, or does the general population from Overlook intend to do that also?
Yeah, the intention is for myself to ask those questions. Ultimately, with respect to comment, I think generally case law permits any resident to comment at the end of the application.
At the end of the application, not per witness? Okay, thank you. Just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
No, thank you. So anyway, Mr. McKenna, what is proposed for the site?
Are you going to accept him as a professional engineer and civil engineer?
Yes, I think we have done that before here. Just reiterate it, and he is acceptable for his credentials.
Sure. So I'm going to start by just running through existing conditions. We've already touched on that previously, but I know there's some new board members and the site limits have changed a bit. So I have a few exhibits. I'll start with A9, I believe we're on. So.
Kyle, can you explain what A9 depicts?
Sure, so this is an aerial exhibit of the site and surrounding area. It's labeled aerial exhibit, Exhibit A9, again for the record, dated for April 27th, 2022. The project area is delineated in yellow. The project encompasses lot 3.01 and a small portion, approximately 2,400 square feet, of lot 6, just the northern corner here near the tower. Additionally, as was previously mentioned, the application has been amended to incorporate a portion of Lot 2, just along the southeast boundary of Lot 2, for purposes of access to the subject site and Lot 3.01. I'd also like to just touch on the topography of the site. Near the rear of the site, there's an elevation of approximately 370. Near the front of the site, along Strikers Road, it's an elevation of approximately 340. So the site does drop approximately 30 feet from the rear to the front along Strikers Road. Again, as was mentioned before, there is no frontage on Strikers Road from lot 3.01. It's a landlocked lot, so we are requesting 2 variances, one for the lack of frontage altogether, and then one for frontage being less than 300 feet. And just to get our bearings, north is to the top of the page. The property is bordered to the north by the existing railroad line, to the east by residential known as the Overlook, to the south by an existing solar field, also the subject of the bridge application which was mentioned earlier, and to the west by Strikers Road going in north-south direction. If there's no further questions on the existing conditions, I'll jump into the proposed improvements and really just run through the changes that have occurred since really the last time this application was presented. We're going to introduce Exhibit A10. Okay, again, this is Exhibit A10. For reference, north is to the top left of the page. This is essentially a rendered version of the site plan, the overall site layout plan, with an aerial in the background to just help for illustrative purposes. This is a little bit different than the site layout plan that was submitted with the application and other material in February earlier this year. We've made some changes to reflect feedback that we've received in review letters from the board professionals. We did distribute a reduced size version of this plan to the board members in the town, along with a response letter that summarizes our responses to the review letters that we received. The only difference that you notice between this exhibit and the reduced size that was circulated last week on May 11th is this plan actually has a zoning table on it as well. So I think we'll need to mark those that were distributed separately, A11 perhaps. I don't know, Mark, it's a little bit different than what we said last week.
I don't know.
I'll defer to Mr. Bryce on that.
Okay.
Have the board members received that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The table he mentions is not on this.
Okay.
Is this entire,
Yeah, the layout is exactly the same. The only thing that changes is that the table was added to this full-size copy. Other than that, it's the same exact drawing.
how is it word to distinguish what all this means? Because it's very fine print, there's no table describing.
Thank you. Okay, so the first.
Mark that as A11 then.
Okay, thank you. So the first change, probably one of the more notable changes, is the realignment of the driveway. On the previous application, the driveway actually, the site was accessed from lot 6, or a 50-foot wide easement along the northwest portion of the lot 6 property. We've shifted the driveway and access point north along Strikers Road to the existing southernmost access point for the Berry Plastics, or formerly known as the Berry Plastics building, or Lot 2. We did this to address several comments we received from the board and the board professionals, including potential conflicts with the proposed driveway that's on Lot 6 as part of the bridge application. Also with just proximity to adjacent driveways across the street, it's a more flat area of Strikers Road as well, so it's a little bit better suited, and it's an existing driveway as well. We've made a few modifications to the driveway to just help facilitate truck access. The driveway is used by trucks today. It's an existing warehouse and industrial facility. However, we increased the radius of the driveway to help facilitate access. So a WB67 truck can access the driveway right in and left out without any conflict. We are requesting, as Mr. Peck noted previously, a waiver for the maximum width of the apron, where 40 feet maximum is proposed. We're requesting a width of 143.7 feet. Again, we feel this is appropriate because of the nature of the use. It's a permitted use. We need to be able to provide adequate truck access, and this allows us to do that. The revised driveway location will eliminate also the request for the waiver for driveway slope. It's a much flatter portion of the Strikers Road. Frontage is, like I mentioned, so that will eliminate that waiver as well, which is another benefit. As you enter the site, the circulation is very similar. So you're going to enter the site through the existing southernmost access at the formerly Berry Plastic site. You're going to traverse north into the development, and from there it's very similar, with the exception of an additional ring road that was actually added, again, at the request of the board professionals. So you'll notice that we added this ring road along the northern property line adjacent to that existing rail line. So the purpose of this is to help separate truck traffic from standard vehicular traffic. So when vehicles enter, non-truck vehicles enter the site, there'll be signage to help guide them around the ring road if they were to utilize the easternmost parking lot in the rear.
Kyle, the building size has been reduced, correct?
It has, yep. So with the change in the ring road and also some of the other layout changes, which I'll get into briefly, there have been some impacts and mostly beneficial to the bulk requirements for the site. So the building decreased to 563,950 square feet from 592,800 square feet. So that's a reduction of just over 28,000 square feet, which brings the FAR down. It was previously compliant with the FAR of 30% permitted. We were at 29.11%. Now we're proposing a 27.69% FAR. So just for reference, with an FAR of 30%, you could permit a warehouse over 600,000 square feet here. Again, we're reducing it down to 563,950 square feet. There's also a slight reduction in lot coverage, 0.3%. So we're now down to 60.4% proposed for lot coverage, whereas 65% is permitted. One of the other more significant changes, again, this is based on the feedback that we received from the board professionals and the board as well, and comments from the public, is we've actually chamfered the northernmost corner of the building to allow us to expand the buffer that's proposed along the northeastern portion of the project adjacent to the residential overlook, and it's now a minimum of 110 feet across the entire boundary between the two properties. So we've enhanced the buffer, maintaining a minimum of 110 feet. We've also reviewed the berm, and we are going to increase the height of the berm by about 5 feet on average across. So we're going to make it as high as we can while still allowing proper slopes for stability and for plants to be placed along the berm. So we're going to have a mix of deciduous and evergreen shrubs and trees along with ornamental grasses, which will provide a multi-level year-round buffer for the use. Again, minimum 110 feet. On the buffer note, though, we are still requesting a waiver for buffer along the northern property line adjacent to the railroad. With the changes I just ran through with the circulation road and the increase in the buffer along the northeastern property line, we are requesting that buffer relief be granted for encroaching into up to 10 feet along that buffer there, whereas 25 feet is required.
And Kyle, the berm is going to be situated at a higher elevation than the rest of the property as well, correct?
Correct, yep, so I can just clarify on that. The berm, so the topography of the site, actually, there's a high point right around the midpoint of the rear property line. And so the berm will change, it'll be a little bit lower on the northernmost side, and then it'll increase near the center of the property line, and then it'll basically be maintained from there. So it'll provide approximately 10 feet of extra buffer from the adjacent residences. So if you walk out of the door of the adjacent residence, it'll be at least 10 feet higher than that, plus the plantings that are proposed on top of the berm, which again are a mix of evergreens and deciduous trees that'll provide a nice screen year-round. The proposed planting height of the trees is 10 feet is what we're proposing. The growth rate varies with the different species, but most of the evergreens are growing at a rate of 1 to 2 feet per year, with a maximum full mature height of ranging between 40 to 50 feet. Some of the cedars can actually go a little bit higher than 50 feet. So that's what's being proposed for the berm. We also are proposing landscaping along the northern property line as well to help try and meet the intent of that buffer along the rail line. However, we feel that the benefits of providing the buffer and the ring road would outweigh the detriments of requesting the waiver for the buffer along the rail line.
Let me ask you a question here a minute.
Sure.
This proposal that you have here being shown is a revision of a set of plans that this board has not seen yet. We never heard testimony of it. I know you had our professionals reviewed their questioning, but it was never brought before this board for their comment on it. And now we're coming into another revision of the revision that we didn't see.
The only two changes that were made between the submission that was filed in
I don't care
February.
about the number of, what I'm asking is, we never saw this revision that's based on a revision that we didn't get to see or act on. You said that was based on something that they presented back in January. We haven't had a meeting or a hearing on this situation since last September.
Correct. So the changes that I'm running through right now are what have occurred since last September. In February, an amended site plan.
I realize that, but this is a sketch. This is not a set of plans that shows us, I know you mentioned the topography coming down and then all of the water now slopes towards the very building. I'm getting confused here. We had a set of plans that were presented to us that never came before the board.
Well, we didn't get a chance. We submitted amended,
I understand that.
just so we're clear, we submitted amended plans earlier this year, which is why we're here. And I think there's just been, since those plans, which were reviewed, there's been, based on further review,
But
a
you've
few
acted on that.
additional tweaks. But there's been no action.
No action of the board on those.
Well, no, that's why we,
That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
We're picking up here at a point of time way beyond where we started at.
So
well, we can provide as much testimony as you'd like.
I even have the old plan, if you'd like me to
Yeah.
present the old plan for reference, I can put side by side and do
The
it that
point
way.
is that the board did not get to review that.
Review what? The plan being
set of
presented
plans that
today?
you submitted to our professionals for comment. We never got to review those comments. We're now going on a set of comments that you have in this document.
We filed an amended application in February of this year. With the exception of the berm and the ring road, all of these changes were incorporated into that site plan
Well, I
package.
think that's a significant portion that you're doing with the ring road there. My question would come back to you is, why do you need so many variances when you could have reduced the size of the building? And you apparently didn't reduce the size of the building, but not enough.
There's only one variance that we're seeking, actually. The other two variances have to do with, they'd be applicable whether we wanted to put a 10-foot building there or something, the fact that it's a landlocked parcel. We don't have direct street frontage and we don't have 300 feet of street frontage. The only other variance we're looking for is the buffering variance on the north side of the property. And that was a trade-off, saying we could give more buffer on
The only
the
variance.
east side. So we're adding the variance on for the north side.
Well, my question comes down to, again, is when you talk about it, we reviewed our professionals back in January, was it February that you presented that last
There were,
plan?
there were review letters issued in April of 2022.
By
So
who?
by your professionals,
Which ones?
by Suburban and Mr. Ritter.
Who did the original one for the submission before that?
I believe it was Colliers and Mr. Ritter.
Colliers, yes.
Right.
And we determined that they had a conflict of interest here.
Correct. So then, based upon the review letter that we got from Suburban in April, plus Mr. Ritter's updated letter, based on our amended site plan, that's where they said, okay, well, we'll do something with the berm and we'll do this ring road to address the comments that were made in these April 2022 letters.
I can understand that, and I'm sure that's the way that we would go, but I would like to have had the board see the original presentation that come to us to make comment on it before they went and make changes on that, those comments. So that's my statement. Where does that leave the board?
With our amended site plan application.
Okay? I'd like to just query our professionals here,
Yeah,
our engineer.
our April 19th review letter is the latest technical review that's been performed, and it was based on the plans that were submitted in January and February. As a result of these comments, a revision to the amended plan was prepared, but it wasn't going to be ready in time for any further technical review. It would be presented here tonight in any case, so I think what they're presenting is, while there are changes, the ring road is a change. The change in the buffering was made to, I'll say, further improve the plan, in my opinion, so that they have proper buffer, the area of the property that matters most, I think.
Okay. Good to you.
Well, I don't know if I can add much. My review letter is also in response to their submission. And the letter was issued on April 18th. The plans that you have before you this evening, I think, is essentially their response to the questions raised in a review letter. It's not, what's here tonight is not the technical submission that was submitted, that we reviewed in our letter. It's in response to comments we made in our letter.
There will certainly be technical comments that come from a review of the revised plans, the grading, the circulation, turning templates, things like that still will have to be reviewed and commented upon.
That's what I'm saying, the board hasn't, we're
Had the benefit.
looking at this synopsis of what we are to at this point. We didn't get a chance to see the steps coming up to this. So that's my only comment on it. Mr. Price, you have any?
Oh, I have no.
Okay, I'm sorry. Continue the presentation.
Okay, so again, just to reiterate, so the comments that have changed since the plans that were submitted and are subject of the April review letters are limited to the addition of the ring road, which again was a comment to address, or it was a change to address comments and feedback received from the board professionals. It was pretty prevalent that was an important aspect to improve the project. So we went ahead, made the change. The result is, again, a net decrease in impervious, so stormwater. I'm going to touch on that, but a lot of the other technical aspects of the project are only improved by this change. So similar to the buffer, it's adding green space, it's reducing impervious cover, it's reducing the intensity of the building. Other than that, the function and just general circulation of the project remain the same. Or at least the same relative to the plans and reports that were filed in completion in February of this year. And were reviewed by the board professionals as well.
How about lighting for the site, Kyle?
So lighting, again, it's the same, very similar to what was done before. It's compliant. The only comment that we had received and discussed with the review professionals was related to the lighting along the eastern facade of the building. There was a request to reduce the lighting towards the wall and really try to lower the lights if we can and lower the light intensity of that wall, considering it's adjacent to a residential use. And we agreed to review that and basically point all the lights away from the residential use adjacent to that wall, and also reduce the height of the lights and the intensity of the wall on the eastern facade. Other than that, the lighting is generally remains unchanged compared to the other previous application. There was also a comment about dimming of lights near the easternmost parking lot to minimum levels appropriate for security during nighttime hours of operation. The applicant agrees to comply with that, so long that a minimum light level is maintained for security. Just remaining technical items, so the stormwater, again, this is ultimately a net decrease in impervious cover. The amended application material that was submitted back in February also addressed some previous comments provided by both Colliers and Suburban as well about redirecting water away from the formerly known as Berry Plastics site or Lot 2. We've gone ahead, we've actually redirected an entire portion of the basin, discharge from the basin near the southern corner of the site to the existing storm water infrastructure within Strikers Road, which is what was asking us to do. So essentially, we redirected stormwater while also meeting our criteria for the DEP as well. So it's basically an over detention of stormwater on the site to help mitigate some existing off-site stormwater issues that were noted. Another item that was discussed previously and is impacted by the inclusion of Lot 2 into the application is the sanitary sewer conveyance and capacity as well. Previously, as part of the project, there was a gravity sewer main proposed along Strikers Road in the southbound direction to tie into an off-site pump station that exists on what is commonly referred to as the Petrucci project, just down south along Strikers Road. By incorporating Lot 2, there's actually an existing pump station on Lot 2 with a force main that we plan to utilize to convey sewer flow from the proposed building. As was previously discussed, we are still requesting a wastewater management area amendment for the sewer to get this project into the sewer service area. But by incorporating Lot 2, we have existing infrastructure to utilize to connect to the public sewer system. And we also would be actually mitigating the sewer demand from for the township. And I'll elaborate on that. So the Berry Plastics facility has a treatment works approval for just over 14,000 gallons per day. So they're approved to discharge approximately 14,000 gallons per day. 11,000 gallons of that is actually allocated for processing and water blowdown from the cooling towers. As part of this application, under the new ownership, that process would actually be eliminated, which would take offline a pretty significant contributor to the sewer flow from Lot 2. The resulting allocated demand for Lot 2 would be 2,500 gallons per day. When you combine that 2,500 gallons per day for the existing warehouse use with the proposed demand of 8,000 gallons per day from the proposed warehouse, you'd end up with a total demand for the project of 10,500 gallons per day, which would actually be a net deficit relative to what was permitted and allocated for the Berry Plastics project per the TWA, DEP TWA approval.
Are you authorized to allocate sewer capacity?
Correct. I'm sorry?
Are you authorized to allocate sewer capacity?
In my person? For this project?
For this project, yeah.
No, this project is still, like I mentioned, it's still subject to an amendment to the sewer service area. So at the moment, no, but under proposed conditions, we would ultimately be, by way of this project, result in a net
Well, this board-
decrease.
That's the question, but this board is not responsible for making the sewer allocations. I believe that's the council, and that would be part of the sewer engineer. I mean, you seem to be assuming that you can do this
Well, we're actually,
without the authorization to do it.
we're actually assuming that this would be a condition of approval as another outside agency approval, such as getting a DEP or a DOT permit. You know, if we don't get the expansion of the sewer service area, then we'd be unable to satisfy that condition and it would terminate. But yeah, so we're asking that this be treated like.
Right, again,
Any other-
we're not requesting that allocation tonight, we're just simply providing testimony on how the infrastructure would work, because we had submitted a sanitary sewer memorandum that was part of the application, both initial and amended back in February. So I just wanted to provide some clarification on that memorandum and what was outlined in the memo.
Can I say something? SCE sent a report of different things that needed to be done, things that needed to be acknowledged, some things that were completed. And you sent a report giving things that had been done, things that still needed to be done. You're going to acknowledge and give testimony about different things. And you have everything numbered, 2.01 on both sides. To me, it would be very easy to follow this whole thing tonight if we started with 2.01 on both papers and said, this has been done or has not been done, like it's written on here. Don't you think it would be? This
Sure.
is very confusing. We're hopping from one thing to another, and it's just very confusing. But if we followed these numbers, like are on both of these reports, I think that would be kind of easy.
Sure, I can
Easier.
certainly do that.
We'll do that.
Yeah, let's do that.
Reduction. We can touch on it later, but assuming that you would be reducing, since you now own, or NFI now owns the very plastic site, you'd be reducing the use in that building in order to mitigate the total use that you would like to propose. But are you assuming that there would be a reduction in the original proposed, let's say, usage of the very plastic site? Are you also reducing, let's say, employees per day, or how are you? I would just like to take that, you know, when it comes, whenever we.
Sure.
We can kind of expand on that later, but if you want to put a pin on that.
Okay, that's fine, yeah, I can circle back on that.
Can we go down to all these different things and say, like, this has been taken care of, we need to do this still, this has been changed, and that we can read it in front of us as we
Sure.
go? You understand, you know what I'm saying?
That's the 2.01
Yeah.
would be the first.
This is in reference to the April 19th technical review.
This is the Suburban April 19th, 2022 technical review.
Right, and then their report on May 11th, Bowler.
Right.
Okay.
Because they all relate to this.
Sure, so 2.01 relates to the waiver request for parking in between, parking adjacent to the building. We have reviewed this layout with the fire official, and they're comfortable with the layout as proposed. I met via virtual meeting with the fire official and reviewed the layout. We reviewed the truck circulation together. So we expect that they would accept the layout as proposed and are still requesting that waiver. It's been granted previously for similar applications.
But the basis for that request is what?
Yeah, the nature of the use, I think, is really the unique thing here. I think I would be guessing, I guess, but, you know, really intended for more like a retail development. And here with the loading adjacent to the building and the way the parking is laid out, they felt that they were comfortable. It's also larger drive aisles, larger circulation to accommodate truck traffic. So when I showed them the truck circulation throughout the site, the way we have things laid out, they were comfortable with what we're proposing. 2.02 is related to the Highlands consistency determination, specifically the proposed banked parking.
you can probably talk about that a little more now.
Sure. So similar to the previous application, we are proposing banked parking along the eastern corner of the property, adjacent to the residential buffer. This was at request of, I'll just highlight the area here. This is at the request of the Highlands to provide, in the event that the parking is not needed, there's no demand for it based on the ultimate tenant for the property, it would remain as a meadow planted area to just add green space to the project and provide a benefit from an environmental perspective.
How big is that space currently under this U?
It's a couple of acres. I don't actually have the exact square footage, but it's the total is, it's equivalent to 167, 167 parking spaces. So it's approximately, it ends up being a couple of acres, but I could double check and provide that for you.
Okay, and that was within the determination that they provided, those are the.
There was a request within one of the conditions that requested that we present to the board banked parking in lieu of surface parking on day one.
Now it's one of the conditions at the Highlands.
Correct, in the Highlands.
March 10th, 2020.
Correct.
Were there any other determinations or that you all needed to?
There are other conditions within their Highlands letter related to water, sewer, amendment for sewer water treatment area as well. But this was really the only request that impacted the layout that we wanted to present to the board. Some other stormwater criteria they request that we provide planting within the stormwater basins, which we've agreed to. So I would say this is the only other condition that was flagged by your review professional as for requesting testimony, basically, to provide.
With respect to the bank parking, what would be the criteria that would be used to determine if it was needed to be constructed at a future date? Is there a measurement or indicator that the board would set as a condition in any kind of action they take?
Yeah, I mean, typically I'd expect that would be in the resolution of approval as a condition, and what the means would be, whether it's at the discretion of the owner or if the board would like to be notified. But generally, the idea is we're approved for the parking, the infrastructure is in place for the parking, and so if it's ultimately required, the applicant would be permitted to construct the parking if they see fit. Obviously, they want to provide green space, otherwise they would just ask to have it built right now. They're actually going above and beyond by putting in extra stormwater infrastructure and everything to accommodate this potentially, but also allowing it to just basically be banked parking.
Is it your proposal that it would be left to the owner-operator of the site to determine if and when they need it?
Yeah, that's what we would propose, unless the board had no other suggestion.
Then you'd have to come in front and ask again.
No, because it's approved parking, the infrastructure, stormwater, everything's designed for that parking. It's really just trying to provide a benefit. If we don't need it, we wouldn't construct it.
But yeah, what Kyle is suggesting is if the board wanted to put some sort of triggering event in the approval, should we get it? That's.
Comment 2.03 was in regards to the truck access being proposed. As I noted, we did run truck circulation. We were expanding the radius coming into the site. The driveway would be limited to right turn in only and left turn out only for trucks. It would be signed appropriately, which is a similar condition to what we had previously proposed when the driveway and access point was on lot 6.
Can you restate that and kind of show us what you're talking about?
Sure. So the access point, which is just near the existing southern driveway on lot 2, is being widened to facilitate truck movement. We've run truck circulation modeling to make sure that the truck can access the site. So what we're proposing is that access and ingress and egress from the site would be limited to a right turn in movement only. So trucks would travel in northbound direction along Strikers Road, make a right turn into the site and continue on into the project. Trucks leaving the site would stop and make a left turn out only, and it would be signed appropriately to limit any right turn movement out. The goal of that is really just to That's the way the driveway is designed to function. That's the most convenient route for truck traffic, so that's what we're proposing.
So every one of those trucks are gonna come out and come into, up through our town. It's coming out, you make a left or a right.
We have a traffic consultant here that'll talk about off-site circular anticipated patterns and numbers of trip generation.
Yeah, I'd like to look at them.
With respect to that access, the easement and form of easement, that'll all be submitted later.
Correct, yep, so the easement, there is an agreement in place. Like I said, the applicant actually owns that lot, so they are going to provide an easement for access and utility as well.
I guess they know the owner, so it won't be an issue.
That's my understanding. Also on that note, there was some recommendations that we provide curbing along the driveway. We agree to that as well, just to improve the aesthetics and function of the driveway. And that would be along the western side of the driveway adjacent to the existing Berry Plastics building.
Will that impact the stormwater management as it was modeled or anticipated, the curb?
Installation of the curb, no, it wouldn't have any significant impact as far as conveyance. And the driveway is already, it's essentially a minimum 30 feet wide, which is appropriate, same as the remainder of the site, so we think it's adequate without any significant changes. 3.03B, I previously touched on this, the changes to the stormwater system. There was a concern brought up in the initial review letter and subsequently in the review letter from April of this year regarding some off-site drainage issues downstream from this project across the other side of Strikers Road, I believe down near the asphalt plant. So it was requested that when we do our stormwater design, and I actually met with Colliers initially, walked the site, put together our stormwater maps, and it was a request at the inception of the project that we try to mitigate stormwater runoff to the existing Berry Plastic, or formerly known as Berry Plastic site. And we did that in the initial design. The request was to redirect even more stormwater conveyance away from the Berry Plastic site. So we made another change that's reflected on the plans and reports that were filed in February of 2022. Again, to redirect several acres additionally, essentially the entire stormwater basin that's along the southern corner of the property line now discharges to the Strikers Road right away. And again, while still meeting the reductions in stormwater quantities and quality required by the DEP.
Were you able to analyze the rerouting of Basin 1B from Basin 2?
I believe Basin 1B would push us over the edge of the reduction requirements. We'll continue to look into that, but I have not come up with a solution that would allow Basin 1B to also discharge into that area. But again, Basin number 2, which is down in the southern corner, also used to discharge adjacent to Lot 2. So we've taken that entire stormwater basin offline from that point of analysis downstream.
You say that it's essentially alongside the driveway.
Correct. So the majority of the existing site, stormwater runs to the eastern property line of what was the Berry Plastic site and then through their system. So when we analyzed it to reduce the stormwater runoff to that area in quantities as outlined by the DEP and the Township Code. It was requested that we actually over-detain and redirect some stormwater. So we've gone ahead and done that.
But I'm sorry, I was talking about the one to the right on the map, to the right of that little,
This one here?
alongside the driveway, in between the unpaved driveway. Yeah, that's actually what?
That's an existing stormwater basin.
Right.
So we don't propose any modification to that. That's for the existing facility.
Would 2 or 1 be, if I'm not, please correct me if I'm wrong, would they feed, does anything feed into the current one?
Yes. A good portion of the site is conveyed toward that basin. And actually the inlets that a portion of our site discharge to does go through that basin.
And so I know there seems to be a reduction, but there's actually an increase in impervious surface around with this ring road, as you call it. So what does that convey to the original very skinny alongside the unpaved Lot 6? What does that actually what will that convey in terms of velocity, or in terms of usage? I mean, I think it's going to get some extra usage, right?
So the way the DEP requires us to analyze the stormwater is the peak runoff, so the peak flow. Those peak flows are all being reduced. The DEP outlines criteria based on percentage, based on the intensity of the storm. So we meet all those reductions. And we actually met those reductions initially when Basin 2 over here in the south corner also went to that same point. So we met it then, and now we took that completely off, redirected it, adjusted some of the characteristics of the basin, removed it entirely. So now we really reduce to this lot 2, but we also need to meet the reductions on the other side out the Strikers Road. So there's only so much that we can reallocate without robbing Peter to pay Paul, so to say. And I think that's what I'm saying is Suburban asked basically if we could also reconvey this other basin here, and I think we're at the point where if we do that, it would be extremely challenging to meet the overall reductions for the site.
The peak rate reductions are the DEP requirement, but you also have an obligation to ensure that whatever happens downstream of that is being adversely affected. So,
Correct.
as the board indicated, there's increased impervious, so the volume of runoff is likely greater tomorrow than it is today.
Correct.
And it's just being controlled at what rate, so it's being held back. And the existing basin along the easement entrance drive, that's going to see more volume tomorrow than it does today as a result of this development, I think. That's a fair statement.
Overall, likely, yes.
And then, in your analysis, though, do you know, did you model the existing basement along the easement to see if that additional volume would surpass its storage capacity or release rate capacity?
I believe that there was a request in your letter as well for us to do further analysis on that. And in this response letter, it's we agreed to review that further and provide a more in-depth model that incorporates the system that's on Lot 2 today.
You don't have an answer today, but the agreement is you would do.
No, and we are required also, again, there's an overlapping of agency jurisdiction. We are required for the Soil Conservation District to prove downstream stability as well. So there is outlet protection and calculations in our stormwater report, and we do analyze downstream stability, but Suburban has asked us to do so further, and we've agreed to do that.
And when you say downstream, are you referring also downstream all the way to the detention basin down by the other plant? All right, down right before the bridge? Is that going to be, metered and looked at and channeled because of erosion coming out of that?
We'll need to, correct, that all gets reviewed by the board and the Soil Conservation District, and we'll need to analyze.
Vortex systems in there and everything else.
Mhm.
What number are we on?
Sorry, that one was actually in here.
Actually, Kyle, if you could clarify, I know you skipped over 2 items, but those are items that you're agreeing to our comments on 3.02.
For the ADA
3A.
curb ramps. Correct, yeah. So for 3.02, there was just a request. I believe the request is that, so our curb ramps as proposed meet the ADA criteria, but there was a request to actually reduce the maximum slopes and the design criteria slightly below the threshold, so we've agreed to that as well. That's what you're referring to?
Yes.
The comment that we previously mentioned about downstream stability and the existing stormwater system on Berry Plastics was 3.04. So I think we addressed that.
302D was the 3-foot velocity design waiver.
Yeah, that's an item that we are still requesting. Yeah, that's something we've discussed both with Colliers, and we've seen granted as a waiver on in the town before. Just given the size of the pipes and the size of the overall development, we don't think it's unusual to request such a waiver. And that's for minimum pipe velocity. The applicant's responsible for maintenance of all the pipes in case there's any debris or anything built up. And there's also comments about stormwater operational and maintenance manuals, which we obviously agreed to as well.
That's item E on the top of page 7.
we need to go on to 3 point.
Item F discusses potential for a need for additional soils testing. Can you comment on that?
For which item was this again?
Sorry. Top of page 7, item F.
303F.
303F.
We agree.
Yeah, we agree. For comment 3.06, again, I think I touched on this, the sanitary sewer. The comment mentioned potential septic. Again, right now the plan is to amend the wastewater, the sewer treatment area, sewer service area. We have an application before the DEP. We've filed this amended sanitary sewer memorandum and basic application material to them. They're reviewing it. Again, we think that this is an improvement by incorporating Lot 2 because we'll be utilizing existing sanitary sewer service. We understand that any approval would be based on the condition of the DEP, the Highlands, and the council. But again, the plan right now is to go through that process. We just believe that this design change by incorporating Lot 2 and having an existing sanitary sewer conveyance system and infrastructure available for us really facilitates that and helps build the case for the amendments that we're asking for. And again,
to the chairman's point, the action that you'll be taking once the water quality management plan amendment is blessed, the treatment works approval application would be combined of both sites. It would show a reduction on the existing buried plastic site and an addition from this site with a net
correct.
equal or decrease.
Correct. So
And that would require the governing body's action to endorse it.
Yep, along with the DEP, as you mentioned. So the DEP is going to analyze the infrastructure, the capacity. It would have to be signed off on by the town. So all of that would be subject to this approval. We're not requesting that approval tonight to amend the sewer allocation for the project. We're just simply.
If for some reason the council didn't agree to a reduction on the buried plastic site, what other option is available? Saying a septic would be an option then for this parcel?
We've preliminarily explored, but it's really not being proposed at this time.
Is there a place on the site where it would go?
Not in the current site plan. I mean, we haven't analyzed it to a point where I could provide testimony on a potential footprint for a septic. Again, the plan right now is to seek for amendment for the sewer service area and discharge it to a public sewer. That's the current plan. And we understand that would be conditioned, this approval will be conditioned on all approvals associated with that, state and local.
Mr. McKenna, I just have a question as to that. I know that you testified earlier that you're looking at a net reduction in the overall sewer, and you're looking to submit a treatment works approval application for that. But buried plastics, I think, is a approved manufacturing, primarily manufacturing with a little bit of warehouse facility. That's its approved use. So what prevents in the future, even this applicant selling that property or another manufacturer coming in there and needing that type of sewage?
Just a
Capacity?
point of clarification, the buried plastic site is a manufacturing warehousing equal. It's not manufacturing with a little bit of warehousing. It's manufacturing. And
Well, Mr. Peck, hold on a second. I'm not here to debate what's going on in buried plastics. I think that there's prior resolutions that describe the approval for that plan, and if the subsequent ordinance that this governing body, or that the governing body adopted is upheld, that will become a pre-existing non-conforming use. And it will be limited in proportion to what the existing warehousing versus manufacturing site. So my question to the witness is, if manufacturing is going to be on that site, and manufacturing is going to need sewage, how does this board control for that and just kind of ignore a permitted existing use with a sewage demand at this point in time? That's kind of striking. Do you understand what I'm saying?
So the demand is not associated with the use per se. It's associated with a specific process of a cooling tower that's on site today. And that cooling tower was permitted within what the DEP's treatment works approval allocated 11,520 gallons per day specifically for blowdown from the cooling tower. So it's not necessarily just for manufacturing. That was a specific item broken out in their request. When I say allocation, I'm not saying literally we're requesting that the board grant this reallocation tonight. I'm just simply stating that right now, that facility, because of that specific process that has occurred, they're permitted to discharge, it's my understanding, up to 130 gallons per day right now under the current approvals. This provides the option to eliminate that process, the cooling tower, with the very high demand of over 11,000 gallons per day, which exceeds what the demand would be theoretically for the proposed warehouse.
But what if a future user of that Berry Plastics property requires the cooling tower?
Then they would need to get another TWA to permit that cooling tower. Any increase, it would be an increase, and any change to any storage conveyance facility or treatment over 8,000 gallons per day requires a treatment works approval through the DEP. So that would trigger a treatment works approval.
Again, I come back to the question then, how are you authorized to make that distribution of the sewer capacity?
I'm not, I'm just simply stating what the flows are and how the flows
That's what you're
match
saying
up.
that you're gonna do, that's just what you wanna do.
This is what we're
That doesn't
proposing.
mean that you're gonna get it.
No, this is what we're proposing, and it would.
Well, how do we
this-
act on something like that?
Well, the approval would be subject to, we're only seeking preliminary approval.
Yeah, I have two comments. For one, this was done actually kind of in direct response to board comments the last time we were here when we were asked, how are we going to account for sewer?
And at that time, you were gonna connect up to the existing sewer line in Strikers Road as an independent contributor to the sanitary sewer system we had. And apparently, you couldn't do that.
Well, no, we feel that we found a better alternative, similar with the driveway. By incorporating Lot 2, it provides what in our opinion is a better alternative that allows us to use a much closer existing piece of infrastructure and also provide, at the end of the day, again, I understand we're not requesting this approval, but it is ultimately would be a net decrease in sewer demand on the township system based on our understanding and review of the treatment works approval and the resolution.
And I would also just, once again, add, we are only seeking preliminary, so some of these issues,
Sometimes we have to get to the realistic point on it.
And Mr. Peck, this came up in the bridge application, and I know that you were here and present for my diatribe as to that. We do have an ordinance, that requires certain provisions, but
and we believe,
preliminary
and we
approval,
believe to be satisfied.
And I think that this board has to be satisfied that the site plan is providing a feasible alternative for all of the necessary services that are going to be required for the proposed site plan.
Understood, and that's why we're confident that the plan that we're proposing more than adequately satisfies the provision of all those necessary services.
So is this really a site plan application including the Berry Plastics site? Because you're changing some of the elements of that site plan by proposing a restriction or reduction of process units or uses in that building.
Well, the Berry Plastics site is a part of the application, and that Lot 2 has been incorporated into the application, has been noticed as part of the application, and all of the plans account for Lot 2. So I think that that's already been accounted for.
Not to this extent, however, right?
No, it's only included insofar as it provides access. There's certainly implications, I think, that, I think the engineer, the planner, and maybe the board members would agree that, you're impacting that pre-existing site by virtue of this application.
Well, it's going to be reduced, and the case law certainly supports the fact that when you have a reduction in activity or intensity of use on a site, that you don't have to come in for an amended site plan approval.
I don't know if that's correct, because there's other elements aside from, we don't even know what's proposed for Berry Plastic. That's the problem with that theory. And I think that even in the initial review, you're looking at a consideration that if any approval was granted by this board, Berry Plastics and the implications that stormwater management and other types of infrastructure may have, including traffic, on the Berry circulation plan would have to be analyzed as well. And then I'm going to tell you, Mr. Peck, I'm also concerned that if you're really taking the position that this is going to be functioning as one unit, this is a whole new application.
We're not suggesting it's working as one unit. We're suggesting that we can use some of that allocation, because the manufacturing use that's going to require those cooling towers.
With all due respect, I'm getting the impression that we're robbing A to supplement B, and then we'll worry about A later.
I think that's what I.
Any further outbursts, even applause, I'll have the room cleared.
Just to provide some clarification again, it's not the use per se that's demanding that allocation. It's a specific piece of equipment within that building that is being taken off, that would be taken offline. It's not that a warehouse can't function without a cooling tower.
But that's not part of this application.
I can bring Mr. Landsberg up, and he can testify as to what's occurring at Berry Plastics now and what's proposed in the future on that site.
I don't think that that's appropriate as part of this application.
It's only in response to questions, because we don't think that it is a part of this application. We don't think Berry is a part.
So it certainly seems to be that you're making it a part of it by incorporating their sewer capacity into your sewer, which you don't have, and you're not in the sewer service area.
Well, and as was
I mean,
stated before, that would be a
putting the
condition
cart
of
before the
approval.
horse here, before you should have come in with that application.
Which application?
Well, the original one. You testified at the completion hearing that you had sewer allocation for that property. Your sewer engineer certified that he had it. He didn't have it. He wasn't in the sewer service area, and he didn't have allocation.
But again, we believe that we have the facilities there, the allocations there, and that the uses on the site accommodate this. And at the end of the day, the township is going to see a reduction in the sewer use coming out of that property.
You're making that application, that, again, this board has nothing to do with that allocation. But we would like to know that you had it before you give us even a preliminary approval. Our practice been going on a long time. That's why on our questionnaire, we require a TWA.
I think just to clarify, when we came in,
Hold on a second, maybe let's finish with the witnesses. I'm trying to keep the record somewhat clear here. I think that we'd like to hear, but I think that we have one witness that's currently being examined.
And I certainly understand that, but I'm wondering if, now that this question's been raised and it appears to be one of great import to the board, that perhaps we should just get that out of the way, address it.
Mr. Peck, I completely agree with that, but maybe you can just hold off on recalling the witness after this witness is done, just so that the transcript is clear instead of bouncing back and forth.
And actually, speaking of which, how are you doing? You need a break?
I'm okay. I can keep down.
All right. As you were.
Thank you.
I believe we were
Sorry, I
at,
lost track. 3.09, that's where I was.
3.08.
Yeah. 3.08 was just a comment about a label being added to the plans. We'll address that and add the label. 3.09 similarly is related to another label for catch basin, which we acknowledge, and we will address the plans to include that label. Sheet 506, I'm sorry,
This is comment 310.
3.10, yep. Yeah, this was, there was a little bit of an issue with some of the existing topography, so we'll make sure that that shows up on the plans moving forward. 3.11 and 3.12.
No longer applicable.
Yeah, no longer applicable. We agreed for 3.16 was related to the curvature of the proposed access drive. We agreed to evaluate that. And we will increase the K value as requested if we are able to do so, given the constraints of the site.
And doubling back, I think you missed a few. 3.13 and 3.14 we can comply with?
Correct, yep. Yeah, it's, sheet 3.17, similarly, just addressing some information on profile sheets. 3.18 is just, again, some supplemental information for grading and stormwater that we'll provide on sheets. 3.19, we already did touch on this a bit in regards to the existing stormwater conveyance and detention systems on the Lot 2, which we will investigate further as requested.
If the conclusion is that there's inadequate capacity, you'll propose design solutions and have to come back?
Correct, yes. Well, yeah, we would detail that on the plans of the proposed solution as needed. 4.01, just some comments on one of the species of shrubs, which we will replace with a native species as requested. 4.02 has been addressed. 4.03, we have addressed via the rendering that we presented earlier, Exhibit A10.
So this is where it was recommended that the landscape berm be extended further to the north to add to the effectiveness of the screening design.
Correct.
So then, as a response to that, this letter we received a month ago, is in response to that, we went ahead and did this enhancement to what we submitted showing the extension of the berm.
Correct. Rather than simply say we would agree to it, we prepared a plan and rendered it and to help illustrate how we would respond to this comment.
And just for the berm, Kyle, what does the ordinance require?
25 feet, and we're proposing 110. And not necessarily for berm, but for buffer. So there's no berm required. It's really just a buffer of 25 feet.
In the Exhibit 810, it wasn't just an extension of the berm, that's been what triggered the chamfer of the building and modification of the circulation ring road?
Correct, yep, which I know is in here as well for the ring road. So it's a combination of the two comments, the berm and buffer extension and the ring road, which resulted in the chamfer to the building and a decrease in the square footage and all the other reductions in impervious cover that I mentioned.
4.04?
We've addressed this, and there was a comment and question about if the board would request fencing, they would require it. We will be happy to comply with that. If the board would like to see fencing added within the buffer areas, we will provide it.
Just with respect to that buffer, you testified that the height of the berm would be 10 feet above the grade along the overlook property?
Correct. So we've reevaluated with the expanded buffer, and I was just trying to provide some color as to how high the berm would be. It varies in height, again, from elevation, it'll be approximately from elevation 374 on the northern side of the property up to 380 on the southern side of the property. That's because the existing grade changes there. So that would give you a grade differential approximately of 10 feet from the areas outside of the existing residence adjacent to the north and the top of berm. And then on top of that is trees and other buffering.
With a 10-foot planted height.
Correct, yes.
So the top of the berm, I'm sorry, the top of the berm is 380.
It ranges from 380 down to 374, just because we are confined by the existing topography around it. So up near the, call it the southeastern half of the berm, it'd be around elevation 380, and it just basically follows the existing topography down to the northern side, down to elevation 374.
So what's the top of the elevation of the warehouse roof?
The top is, the finished floor is 365.5. Top of building plus it would be 410.5.
410.5, so you're 40 feet above the top of the berm in that corner.
It's
Well, with
closer.
the 10-foot
closer
trees,
to
you'll be
35.
35, so you'll be 35 feet above.
Correct. And we do have some perspective exhibits that we prepared as well to help illustrate what the view would be like from both the ground floor and the first or second story window of what we consider the worst case scenario, which is just reference the northernmost residents adjacent to the proposed building. So I'd be happy to introduce those after we go through these letters.
I got a question, it's a little different, but it goes back to you built your buildings. I mean, I worked in these factories, not quite this, but a little bit bigger, smaller type stuff. All right, 32 acres under roof. Are you planning on putting windows up high on that building that it's going to affect the light coming out in any fashion? That it's going to be above your tree line? I mean, you look at the factories over here, you can see.
Yeah,
We could have Mr. Landsberg.
yeah, I would defer to
If
the applicant.
that's okay with the chairman, he can.
Let's let him testify that you connect.
So I believe we have
Will these trees block-
4.05.
Sorry.
I'm sorry?
That's okay. I was gonna ask, are these trees gonna block the view for the people in Overlook?
So that's what some of our, we did prepare exhibits to try and illustrate that. It depends on when. So on day one, it depends on where you are. Obviously, if you're on the second floor, on day one, with the initial planning at 10 feet, it depends on which building you're in, but likely the answer is no, not 100%. You would be able to see the building. Once you hit mature growth, I mean, the trees would be 40, 50 feet tall in some areas, which would, I believe, it's somewhat speculative, but would likely be very difficult to see the buildings. Does that answer your question?
I guess, I just thought maybe you'd be planting initially trees that were taller in the beginning.
You really have to be careful when you plant trees. To go and put a couple 140-foot tall trees, I'm not sure that would be feasible. And also, the viability of a tree, once you go beyond a certain size, they tend to not live. So we really wouldn't recommend going much taller than 10 feet. We felt that was a pretty good middle ground to provide an immediate buffer, but also give the tree a good chance and just make it feasible.
These aren't saplings that you're putting.
A 10-foot tree is a pretty large tree to be planting. Okay, so
4.05. Light fixture and pole design.
yeah, these have all been addressed, no further action, I believe. 4.06, again, I believe I just touched on this as far as elevation of the neighboring properties relative to the improvements, but if there's any further questions, again, I'd be happy to.
There's discussion about the dimming of the lights. Is there a proposal on what method of control and, say, hours of the day or intensities they might dim to?
Like I said, the applicant's willing to agree to that, but the intensity would be, that's something I'd like to just discuss further. Maybe
Other applications, sometimes it's like 50% intensity.
yeah, there's a minimum value we want to maintain just to make minimum safety for security purposes. but they are open to reducing the lights during.
What's the minimum value?
Typically, we do a 0.5 to 0.1, would be minimum foot candles for just like security lighting, just to make sure it's relatively safe.
What value?
0.5.
0.5.
Yeah.
Kyle, with regard to comment 4.06, did you have any exhibits or anything that you wanted to show?
Yeah, I do have, like I said, I have some additional perspective views we could present.
I think it'd be appropriate.
So this would be exhibit A12. And so essentially what we did was this is exhibit A12. It's called NFI facility existing with building. And it's dated today. So what we're looking at here is essentially a view rendered, modeled. If you were at the, there's a blow up in the bottom left corner of the screen with the building near the bottom left of that blow up. And then the property line adjacent to the existing residence travels in the north-south direction plan view. And what we're looking at here is what I think was actually mentioned earlier, that probably the worst, the most difficult to screen area would be for the existing residents northernmost along the property line. So what we did was we prepared and we're presenting this exhibit to show, based on the model, the topography that was prepared, based on the survey documents, what the anticipated view would be based on existing vegetation out there today. So this is a picture of what it would look like with no screening whatsoever, essentially 6 feet off the ground at the northernmost residence out there today. The building, you can see, is visible in the background. Again, this is without the proposed berm, just to give a little bit of perspective as to what you would see. So existing screening, just trees that are on the residential property today.
So it's existing conditions with the
Existing
building.
conditions, viewed from a 6-foot height, which is basically standing outside the northernmost residence.
Is that a tree survey, like accurate locations? Or?
These are approximate. I mean, it's really just for illustrative purposes. Obviously, it's a summertime view. Those are mostly deciduous trees. So I understand, but you can essentially see that other than the existing vegetation, there's nothing, right? That's what we're trying to show in this.
But it's still an artist's rendering.
Correct. Yeah. This would be A13. So this is A13, similar exhibit, view from building 1. For reference, building 1 was the first building, northernmost, with initial planting height, approximately 6 feet in height. So as you can see in the background, again, you still can see the building. Again, this is where the building is the closest to the residence. So we're trying to be fully transparent on what we think would be the worst case scenario with the buffer. This is, again, planting height approximately 10 feet. So this does help screen some of the building from view, but obviously you still can't see the building. So to the question earlier about whether you will be able to see the building, the answer is yes. In mature conditions, again, these trees that are being planted here, a steady line of trees, again, multi-level grasses, shrubs, deciduous trees, evergreen trees, with heights ranging from 18 inches off the ground up to mature heights of 50 plus feet. Under mature conditions, you would not see the building, I believe, but obviously that's speculative. It's not out there today, so I can't say directly, but we believe that this will turn into a really nice buffer and provide some benefit day one. Just illustrating kind of, again, worst case scenario. We also have an additional, this would be A14. It's a similar exhibit by the same name. The only exception is that this exhibit is modeled from an elevation of 15 feet, which again is intended to show the second story. So if you're looking at a second story window, what you would see. So again, we believe there is a benefit from the berm. You can see some trees, and this dark color is intended to show the proposed grade elevation, which is increased from where the green line is on the plans. So again, we're proposing 10-foot trees with a mixture growth rate of approximately 2 feet a year. Some of the species are 1 to 2 feet, but some of the evergreens grow 2+ feet a year.
You just raises the question, is there any other components on the roof, like mechanical equipment, or are they on grade? Do you know?
I would defer to the project architect. We could certainly close the loop on that. Mr. Landsberg may be able to answer that question as well. I believe the answer is that they would not be a view, either setback or hidden, but I would defer to Mr. Landsberg, the architect, to confirm.
I think we can skip section 5, because that'd be Mr. Witchner, but moving on to section 6.
So, well, the section, just to point out, comment 5.05 was the comment related to the ring road. Again, just to bring up. Going back to Exhibit A10, so 5.05. Again, we were simply trying to agree to this comment regarding the addition of a ring road, but also provide an illustration of what it would look like and how it would work. And again, the technical impacts are from these two changes that were not in the previous submission are a decrease in impervious, decrease in FAR, and building coverage altogether. So we feel like the previous technical design would only be made more simple by these changes as well.
And Kyle, this is in response to the comment 5.05, which reads in part, for a building of this size, it is typical to provide a ring road or service road that bypasses the loading areas and provides a safe route for automobiles to travel around the building to access parking areas. It is strongly recommended the site layout be modified to provide a service road along either the eastern or western side of the building to eliminate conflicts with automobiles and tractor trailers. So is that what you tried to accomplish as shown on the rendering?
Yes, that's what we made this change to address that comment. As I previously noted, vehicles would be signed to continue straight for passenger vehicles if they were to be utilizing the rear parking lot. It's not that atypical in a warehouse development to have to direct folks by sign. And the 5.06, I also provided testimony on. We have run truck turning analysis for the project. The trucks can circulate the site in both directions with no conflicts, and access the site right in and left out.
And I guess that's a comment that would change as a result of what you're presenting tonight, but you'll agree to.
I've run circulation for this layout as well, so I'm testifying that it will work in both directions without conflicts, and happy to provide a truck turning plan if as requested.
Yeah, we would request that.
Comment 5.07, I also touched on as well, as far as providing some curbing along the access drive and ensuring that it's maintained at a minimum of 30 feet wide. I believe the remainder of these comments would be more suited for the traffic consultant.
One question I had with respect to this circulation, will the traffic entering the site and utilizing the ring road to get to the rear parking, will those headlights be shining towards the adjoining residential property, or is the buffer adequate to insulate from that?
For headlight screening, I would say the buffer is more than adequate. The building is more challenging, obviously, being But the headlights, I think, is certainly adequately screens those. Section 6 is quite a bit of discussion about geological and geotechnical investigation. We agree.
We agreed on that?
Correct, yeah, we would agree. We're aware that it's a karst site. We've done the applicant's done quite a bit of due diligence related to that, and we agree to the conditions outlined in section 6. Unless there's something specifically that someone had a question on, we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, just in terms of the C, section 601, so you're agreeing conditional field testing and recording of the condition of approval. I mean, is this also inconsistent, to stay consistent with the specified conditions from the Highlands? I feel like we're sort of, as it being proposed, we're sort of skimming over, or perhaps not regarding with as much import as I would feel that they should be regarded. It's quite reasonable to accept the specified conditions that they've set forth. Is that in relation to the stormwater issue that I was bringing up before, or is that something?
The majority of this is, so I just want to clarify, we've done, in my opinion, very extensive testing on this site. We've done dozens of borings, test pits, more than adequate for the stormwater facilities. We've also done scanning of the site to try and identify potential karst conditions, because I think the majority of section 6 is related to the karst condition in the area, just known for this area. So we've done the geological investigation that was required as part of the checklist, and we've actually done some additional testing that wasn't required in the checklist, just as part of the applicant's due diligence process. So I think we've done a very thorough job of analyzing the soils. We've addressed all the comments regarding site soils and permeability rates offered by the Highlands. This is primarily associated with just construction practices and then processes for dealing with sites under construction in karst, a region known for karst topography. And if you, Mr. Cole, if you want to clarify, I mean, I think that pretty well evaluates this. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think we felt it was important that this, and the last note is to make sure this is on the plan, so it's enforceable. But again, we'll be involved in that construction phase to oversee, make sure what they expose or encounter is mitigated in accordance with the standard protocol.
Okay.
And then section number 7, there are a few comments, again, regarding the ADA ramps. It's primarily just notations on the plans and labels, which we agreed to address. But again, happy to go into more detail, but it's mostly details and notes on the plans. In section number 8, again, it is less technical in nature, essentially just outlining approvals and fees that would have to be paid as a condition of approval. And there was some testimony requested on the banked parking at the end, which I believe we hit on, but I'm happy to answer any other questions related to the banked parking.
And did you have the opportunity to review Mr. Ritter's most recent review letter? And did you have any comments relating to that?
I did.
So, and in terms of the bank parking, before we drop that subject, this is perhaps what I was trying to verbalize, or is trying to materialize for me, is what these conditions are set forth by the Highlands Coalition in terms of an open space. What was once almost 40 acres, is that correct?
46.
46 acres is essentially, I don't know if the additional, if it's reasonable to say the additional bank parking, which means unpaved at this point, but open for development as NFI sees fit. I don't know if that's something that we can perhaps reduce now or later, but I think that taking the Highlands Council's sort of stipulations or the conditions that they set forth, I think that we should be taking a little bit more attention to that in terms of what was once is going to be completely changed, and what we can mitigate in terms of runoff, in terms of, in terms of the fencing, you're talking about a high traffic area for animals, for other things. I mean, so I don't know if we can reduce that or nix that or nip that in the budget, to be completely a layman about it, but.
Are you suggesting just eliminating some of the
Well, I think. in
bank
terms of-
parking and just taking it off the
I think
plan?
in terms of March, the March 10th, yeah, I mean, I would like to see a little bit more, your efforts to address it, that, you know, if it's by the letter of what they've said. So maybe that's a whole other memo from Bowler or something that you can, if you don't mind.
Yeah, the request in the condition verbatim was that we seek banked parking rather than, because previously the initial application, that was actually all just proposed parking.
Right.
Was what was presented. And the applicant reviewed what they felt would be really the minimum necessary based on their experience. This is a spec building, which means there is no specific tenant locked in right now. So, but, you know, based on Mr. Landsberg's introduction, he's very experienced in this field. So we met with the Highlands many times. We've been working with them on this project, meeting with them for two plus years now. The comment was really that we requested that be banked and only built if necessary, as deemed by the applicant, because they felt that they don't believe they will need that, but they'd like to have the option to build it if necessary. So if the request is that we pare down the parking a little bit more, I can't answer that right now, but I think the applicant would consider and evaluate if there's any more reduction that could be provided.
Okay. Because if the bank were to become payment, how many feet to the current, or would that increase, or would that decrease? How much?
Well, yeah, it would range. Obviously, it's like a triangular shape.
Yeah.
But the Highlands also, they're more adamant about providing meadowland, creating habitat. They're actually pretty excited about a lot of the meadow grasses that we were planting, because a cornfield doesn't really actually provide much of a habitat. So they would actually rather see that instead of being buffered, created. Their request is to basically plant a meadow mix there, and allow essentially habitat to form.
Kyle, does this depict full build out?
This does, it's difficult to see at the scale, but there is a hatch which delineates the banked parking limit. It's basically, if I kind of go around it, it's the first group of stalls to the east. But it is a bit difficult to see at the scale that we're at. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, so just to go on to Mr. Ritter's letter. So the first comment was just noting that we've added Lot 2 into the application, primarily for purposes of having a shared driveway and access. I believe we've provided adequate testimony on how that driveway will function. Comment number 2.
Before you go on from that, I just want to state for the board that, from my point of view, it's true that this plan is addressing many of the improvements that's going to take place on the Barry Plastics property. But from the standpoint of the applications, I still think it's important that the Barry Plastics property be amended site plan be submitted for that property. And the reason I feel that's important is that these two properties, I assume, will, even though they may be owned by the same company, will be separate realty improvements. And so they can be sold, one separated from the other to different owners or managed that way. And there's substantial improvements that are going on the old Barry Plastic property that should be incorporated into the public record and be able to be carried forward. As well as some analysis that still hasn't been done. Some of the benefits that are being offered for the plan in the rear is that they're redirecting stormwater. And correct me if I'm wrong, because this is more an engineering question, but it appears that some of that water is going to be redirected through the Barry Plastics Basin. And so I think the stormwater calculations and the things that occur with that should be incorporated into that plan so they can be carried forward for any future developments, change in plans, or whatever goes on at Barry. And I would also think that if, as part of this, the permitting for the sewer allocation is eventually changed, I think that ought to become an official part of the record that's carried through on the properties, rather than as a general improvement for the overall rear of the property. So that, again, if there's changes in the future, it's not a question of having a use in the building that demands more gallonage than is available, but was never allocated for or preserved. So, in other words, that we don't have to deal with a non-conforming use in the future. It'll simply be, this is what was approved, you're either going to be able to occupy the building or you're going to have to amend it. So I do think the issue of site plan approval for the front still needs to be addressed, even though I know the applicants have covered a lot of that here. I do think Barry should be at some point, as a condition of this approval, resubmitted and reevaluated for site plan approval, as an amended site plan.
We would accept that as a condition of approval if it's necessary, that Barry has to come back and be reevaluated, that site. That's certainly acceptable.
Thank you.
Okay. So comment number 2 deals with the buffer and berm, which again, this is where the request for an increased buffer, 110 feet in width, extending to the northern edge of the property, was also reiterated, and it was one of the catalysts for us, the applicant, preparing this rendering, Exhibit A10. And I believe that we do accommodate this request. We've provided the buffer as requested, and also agreed to raise the elevation to the extent feasible and extend the plantings.
And those, the revisions in terms of providing the additional height to the berm and the plantings will be incorporated into the landscape plan coming up.
Grading and landscape, correct. But just to clarify, we're still meeting the buffer planting requirement as is. This would just be an addition and supplement to that.
Understood, but you're going to fill the yes, you and I are in agreement, but we're going to fill the gap that's created by the new buffer. Yeah.
Exactly. Comment number 3, this dealt primarily with the what I had mentioned earlier, the encroachment into the buffer along the rail line to the north. Again, with the changes that have occurred, the realignment of the drive aisle and the shift of the drive aisle to provide the extra 110-foot buffer along the northeast property line, we're actually requesting that this encroachment be maintained along the rail line with an encroachment up to 10 feet into the buffer area.
I'm sorry, you said with you mean you're going to save 15 feet along the rail line? Am I understanding?
Sorry, 10 feet. The maximum the maximum buffer or minimum buffer, would be 10 feet.
Okay.
Maximum encroachment, I guess that would be 15 feet into a 25-foot buffer with a minimum buffer width of 10 feet.
Okay, and will that 10 feet be encroached on for grading? I'm just wondering for going back in and filling any gaps or anything like that might develop.
There will be grading within that area, but it's not something that wouldn't be able to be accommodated with a normal slope. We're not proposing any retaining walls in that area.
Okay, so the slopes in there should be enough that if planting is required, we can supplement.
Yes, it would be a planted area. Comment number 4, I would say, is similar. It's not really applicable fully because it mentioned the buffer adjacent to the trailer storage area along the northern property line, which is now being separated by the circulation road. But again, any fencing would be beyond that 10-foot that I just mentioned of buffer being provided. And other improvements as well, truck, trailer storage, curbing, et cetera. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that in essence, the plan will still require a variance for encroachment into the buffer, reducing it from 25 feet to 10 foot in width. That's what your current proposal is.
That's what we're requesting, yes. And then comment number 5 dealt again with the access drive. There was a request to provide curbing adjacent to the building and defining the driveway. We agreed to this in my response letter. We advised that the applicant would install curbing adjacent to the building on lot 2 along the drive aisle, and also provide striping to help delineate and separate between the existing loading area and the proposed access drive.
So what is the current width of the driveway? You're not proposing to widen it, are you?
There was a request to widen it. Right now, it is approximately 30 feet, but it's an edge of pavement. So what I wrote in this response letter was that we would agree to ensure that it's maintained at 30 feet. If that means moving it over 6 inches or so, or a foot, we would do so, and then installing curbing to help just better define that drive aisle. But it's not going to be, on this plan, you would not even notice the change. It's when you measure it on the survey, it's basically 30 feet, plus or minus.
But currently, it's essentially going to become a two-way. What your plan is becoming a two-way. I mean, some truck isn't going to be held up at that turn towards what is past the buried plastics. I mean, it's not going to become some kind of single lane throughway while one truck waits, another has to.
No, we've run a truck analysis for trucks moving, circulating in both directions, ingress and egress throughout this access drive.
Okay.
And to ensure that there's no conflict in two-way circulation. There was comment number 7 was a request to provide sidewalk along the access drive from the proposed driveway improvements or existing drive to the neighboring lot 6, which we would agree to. That would include curb ramps and crosswalk as well. No objection to that. There was also a request to provide sidewalk from the Strikers Road right away to the proposed building. For that, the applicant's preference would be to not provide that, just because they don't feel that it would be very well utilized. And it would just, again, we have the room on the impervious coverage to add that sidewalk, but we would prefer not to, just in keeping with trying to minimize impervious improvements to the extent feasible, and just feeling it'd be underutilized. If the board disagrees and they would like to see it as a condition of approval, the applicant would be willing to provide the sidewalk from Strikers Road right away to the building.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add for the board's benefit is, as you'll recall, in the adjoining warehouse building, they agreed to put sidewalk along Strikers Road, and they also agreed to connect the building in at one point from the building to the sidewalk on Strikers Road. And it's my feeling that if you're going to provide sidewalk along Strikers Road, then you ought to leave the opportunity for people, if they want to use it. And so I think connecting this in, even though it may not have heavy usage, would be appropriate.
Comment number 9 is just noting that we have, the applicant has provided additional landscape islands to the plan in order to conform with the open space requirement. We acknowledge that, and we no longer would require relief for open space. We conform. Comment number 10 is related to the buffer again around the perimeter of the property. Other than the area I mentioned previously, adjacent to the rail line, we would conform with the buffer and exceed it by more than 4 times along the adjacent residential property. We also agreed to provide the 7 additional trees adjacent to Basin 1B that were requested. Comment number 11 was related to the on-site parking. Just to summarize, I think Mr. Ritter is just noting that based on the square footage of the building and breaking the uses out, we would require a variance for parking because 807 spaces would be required, whereas 534 are proposed. That includes the bank parking. But I think basically you're summarizing that you agree that the parking should be sufficient based on ITE and would support that variance. But you can correct me if I'm misrepresenting.
No, I'd agree. I believe that what you're showing between the bank parking and what you're willing to build should be adequate for this size of building.
Building operations, we do have Mr. Landsberg here if there's more detailed questions, but the request would be that the warehouse would be permitted to operate, or it would potentially be a 24-hour facility. Obviously, we don't know the exact tenant, being a spec building, but any further operational questions I would likely direct to Mr. Landsberg. Noise control, similarly, spec building, so we're not precisely sure of the use that would be in the building. However, as condition of approval, the applicant would agree to conform with all noise ordinances, both state and local, and any applicable codes. Fire suppression, the sprinkler, there will be a sprinkler system proposed. Again, we've met with the fire official and reviewed the circulation. There's on-site hydrants. We'll address any comments they have related to distribution of hydrants and the water system, but the building is a sprinkled system. Lighting, I had touched on this earlier, comment number 15, just a request to reevaluate the lighting at the rear or eastern facade of the building to try and reduce the, I guess I'll call it up lighting or light of the wall of the building, because the way we have the lights mounted to the building right now, Mr. Ritter was concerned that it might actually light up the wall more than is necessary, so we've agreed to reevaluate that and try to mitigate that as much as possible by putting some lower lights or directing the lights from the parking lot for that area. The signage, comment number 17, we would acknowledge the intent is to conform with the signage criteria, but without the a known tenant at this time, I don't think we can meet the specific details of the sign, but the intent is to conform with the signage criteria.
Yeah, and as part of this application, there is no signage package. I guess that's all I was trying to say. When you're ready and able, you'll come into the town with a signage package.
Correct. Comment number 19, again, I think we had provided testimony on the access easements and both the easement that's proposed for lot 6 near the southern, or will be the northern corner of lot 6, adjacent to the tower, is still current, and an easement would be provided for the access through lot 2. And I think the final comment, number 20, was just related to a note on how we detail the open space criteria, which we will address as requested. Comment number 21 was regarding the electric vehicle charging, which we will conform with. The applicant agrees it's a state requirement, and we will comply. Yes.
For the fire suppression system on item 14, was this item taking into consideration the addition of lot 2 and their show water system, or what will be the infrastructure need for the extra square footage involved in 3.01?
So it's probably a little bit early on to run through the details of the sprinkler system because it hasn't been designed yet. Typically that goes in with the building, that is filed with the building department application, but this will be standard ESFR system and basically like a rapid response system. And if needed, if there's inadequate pressures, there would have to be a pump. So that's usually evaluated by a specialist sprinkler designer.
And Kyle, the fire suppression system would be self-contained, correct? It would not be linked in with Lot 2, or would it?
Oh, correct, yeah, sorry, that was the question. It would be a standalone. There's its own separate water service from the main on Strikers Road. It's not connected to Lot 2.
It bypasses it completely?
Correct, yeah, it has its own, that's part of the easement is for utility services, so
Yeah,
electric, gas, water, and through Lot 2, there'd be an easement for those connections as well. Our plans show a proposed water vault location for the service connections to the existing main within Strikers Road,
Okay.
and also hydrants and everything.
Office strikers.
Office Strikers, it won't on the site, but it would be fed by its own main from Strikers Road.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, so the chill water system, I'm trying to make sense of this new facet to the amended application in terms of site, what is it, 2, or this very classic, like what Mr. Peck was trying to elaborate on in terms of usage from that building. The sewage usage has nothing to do with the need from.
Fire suppression?
Yeah.
No, totally separate. So right now, there's a discharge of water that has to go into the sewer system from the Berry Plastics, or formerly Berry Plastics site.
Uh-huh.
And they were approved for 11,000 gallons per day. So really our intent was just to show that feasibly, rather than using a sanitary sewer pump station that's down the road, we could connect to the pump station that's on Lot 2. It will need to do further investigation to prove that it's all, make sure that the pump is sized correctly, and any floats, if they need to be adjusted, we'll need to do a deeper evaluation and obviously have it permitted by all of the different agencies that have jurisdiction over that. But we were simply trying to present that it is a viable option, in our opinion, from a technical perspective.
Okay, and then the slope, I think it's going to change from the original plan, right? The slope from 3.01 in terms of
For the sanitary sewer?
yeah. Was there originally like an increase in terms of elevation and the slope exiting towards Strikers Road or the original sewer?
The slope still works in our favor to connect to the existing force main on Lot 2. The existing, without, in its current location. So the previous application proposed a sewer line that ran down when the access drive was over on Lot 6, and then it actually ran all the way down Strikers Road, and there would be actually a gravity sewer main installed as part of the improvement. Now we're simply proposing to tie into the existing pump station on Lot 2, which is located right here near the center of the building fronting Strikers Road. It just seemed more logical and like a real benefit of incorporating Lot 2 along with the driveway.
Okay. Yeah, I suppose it is pre or too early to judge in terms of how much water usage this, whether the original, I don't know how far you all went in terms of the original square footage of the building or this current square footage. I mean, I'm sure NFI has specs in real time and as to square footage and usage in terms of what the need may be from from the existing infrastructure from Strikers, let's say. Perhaps that would be something that we could see.
From this site, or just based on their experience
Yeah, I mean,
in the field?
I'm just trying to, I guess I'm trying to anticipate any hypotheticals or knowledge that you may not have in terms of the knowledge that they may have from previous projects.
Okay, yeah, so the warehouse demand is based on the employee numbers. So the way we submitted in our sanitary sewer amendment, our calculations that breaks out our anticipated use and how we evaluated that. So the warehouse use is based on employee count, and the office use is broken out based on square footage. So that's how we came up with the numbers. And NFI reviewed them. They are comfortable based on, they operate a lot of facilities and I'm sure pay a lot of sewer bills. So I think they know what a facility needs, and they're comfortable with what we had requested, which is 8,000 gallons per day. But again, this is really just, the intent of this was just to convey the technical feasibility of incorporating the system. We believe it's technically feasible.
Thanks, I'm just trying to gauge how much of the current Lopatcong infrastructure will be used technically or funneled into fire suppression systems or other like such. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Does that complete the review?
I believe so, yes. I have nothing further, unless Mark, do you have anything to add?
Just with regards to the waivers requested, you find that those are all reasonable under the facts of the application and the property conditions?
I do, yes.
That would conclude our direct presentation.
In that case, I'll open it to the public to. Before we start that, do you want to take a 10-minute break for people? I see some acknowledgement there, so we'll reconvene at 25 after.
Folks, we need to reconvene.
Let's go. Beck will open it up to questioning of your expert.
Yeah, for questioning of Mr. McKenna, but I did want to clarify one thing with the sewer and our intent for doing that. It's just, at our prior hearings, we had testified that we thought that the township had, a certain amount of gallonage available, and we were asked, well, how are you gonna? So all we wanted to do tonight was just show that we did have a technical solution, recognizing that there's a whole another process of ball of wax involved, but we wanted to show that we do have a plan, to build a better mousetrap when it comes to the sewer. So that was that. But now we'll turn over to Mr. McKenna for questions.
Okay. Do you have any questions of the expert?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. McKenna, good evening. My name is Don Scholl. I think you heard me before. I'm here on behalf of the Overlook Condominium Association. Not surprised, concerns are sound, visual impact. Let's first deal with sound. There's been testimony with regard to a fence. In the plans, it was a chain link fence that's proposed.
Correct, yeah, correct.
And has there been any revision to that? Is a chain link fence still what is being proposed by the applicant?
Yes.
Does the chain link fence offer any sound attenuation at all?
I don't know what kind of sound attenuation benefits it would have. It's really intended for security.
Okay, so really not your area in terms of acoustical study or testimony with regard to acoustical engineering, correct?
Acoustical study of a chain link fence impacting sound would not be my area of expertise.
Okay. Was there any consideration given to a masonry wall
Where?
along the berm as site attenuation as well as sound attenuation?
No, the comment from the board professionals was to provide landscaping and a berm, and that's exactly what we proposed.
I just noted that in the ordinance, 24362B, in terms of screening, there was a reference to a solid fence of a naturally durable material. So would a masonry fence fall within that definition, as you understand it?
I'm not an expert on fences. If a masonry fence versus a solid fence, we meet and exceed the buffer requirements.
Well, you reviewed the ordinance, right?
Yes.
Okay, and you saw in the ordinance the reference to a solid fence of a naturally durable matter. You saw that reference.
Being required.
In terms of screening, I'm showing you the ordinance screening, a reference in subpart 1, a solid fence of a naturally durable material.
Which ordinance is this, Council?
243-62.
Well,
And I
there's
guess-
preceding language of it, as if the board so approves.
Well, it's, in screening, correct. It's options under the ordinance with respect to.
We are willing to consider the alternatives to the chain link fence. I will represent that. I appreciate that.
And with regard to its location, would the location, the height of the berm also be considered? Again, what we're looking at is not only a visual buffer, but sound attenuation. And it would appear that a masonry structure would achieve much greater sound attenuation. Would that be considered?
I don't know what sort of masonry structure you're describing to consider it. But the applicant would consider a fence.
We can actually, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to step on your question, but Mr. Landsberg can address fencing questions, and we plan on presenting him next, because there was some cleanup that he needs to do. So if you do have some questioning about that.
Sure, I guess just for continuity, split block or something of that nature for consideration. And again, it's being thought that a masonry fence would provide much greater sound attenuation. And with regard to the traffic that's proposed in the rear and its proximity to the residential units, that's of significant concern. If I may, I'm just going to go to the plan, and actually, it would be easier just right here. What I'm highlighting, is the bays. The trucks that access the bays, they back in, right?
The trailer's back in, yes.
That's for the loading, that's completed, correct?
Correct.
And once they back in, they can pull back out, correct? Going in the direction that I'm moving the mouse?
Yep, they can pull it back out.
Is there any reason for trucks to have to enter the area that I'm moving the mouse through now?
To have to, I don't know. We're not looking to restrict that circulation, but I would say it would not be as convenient as exiting the other way.
Council, if we could just, for the benefit of the transcriptionist and the court reporter, excuse me, and the record that's being recorded, we're looking at a blow-up of
The amended site plan that was just submitted May 11.
It's Exhibit A.
Exhibit A11, actually, this one is.
Thank you.
And in particular, the road to the east of the site between the building and the overlook development. Perhaps in the context of the use of the warehouse, the trailers that are being loaded or unloaded could back into the bays, entering and then alternatively leaving in the same direction, ultimately exiting onto Stryker's Road. And alternatively, with regard to that rear aisle, it be limited solely to cars, thereby avoiding concerns of residents with respect to passage of trucks, changing gears, multiple trucks, again, creating that sound and also visual disturbance to residents who live in that section of the development.
I would defer that question to the applicant. I mean, there's no reason from a technical site layout perspective that trucks couldn't circulate that area. It may be beneficial if there's multiple tenants in the end, but I would defer whether or not the applicant would be willing to restrict that to the applicant.
From an engineering standpoint, just very briefly, the trucks can enter the bays, load and unload, and then leave without going and accessing that rear aisle. Is that correct?
Is it physically possible? Is that what you're asking? For a truck to access every loading space there and leave without going in the rear? Or
That's the question, that's correct.
I have not analyzed every single loading space. I think it would be possible, but I have not done a truck circulation for every single loading space.
Are you familiar with collapsible bounds?
collapsible.
So in other words, if there were signage posted in the area that I'm moving the mouse on, which is the entrance to that rear lane, that prohibited trucks from entering that area, that's one way to enforce that determination if it was the subject of either imposition by the board or agreement by the applicant, correct?
I would defer to the applicant, that's something they would consider.
And then another way, again, to enforce perhaps would be to put objects there that would neck the area or preclude trucks because of their width from entering the area, accomplishing the same purpose.
That interconnection exists because we wanted to be able to facilitate truck circulation around the building, so that was our intent.
When you evaluated the impervious surface coverage for the site, did you base that upon the total required parking for the site?
The impervious cover that's proposed and identified in the bulk table is based on the proposed number of parking spaces.
The total required number of spaces, or the spaces that are noted as banked, and also with respect to what you're requesting by way of variance relief? Because you're proposing less than the required number of spaces, true?
Not necessarily true. There's two different ways to evaluate the parking requirement. It's outlined in Mr. Ritter's letter. It could be based upon employees, or it could be based upon square footage.
You're not seeking a parking
We are,
variance?
we are currently seeking a parking
So
variance.
my question is, with
We-
regard, I'm sorry, go ahead.
We analyzed the impervious cover based on the proposed number of parking spaces,
Not the required number of spaces.
not the required number of spaces that would be, if you're referencing 807 spaces, we did not calculate the impervious cover based on 807 spaces.
Arguably, and again, I don't want to mince and parse too much, but isn't that arguably double counting with regard to the impervious surface requirement? So essentially, you're requesting a variance, you're getting a variance for fewer than the required number of spaces, but with regard to impervious surface coverage, you're also getting a credit because you're looking at the total parking count reduced from what's required.
No, I don't think that's, no, we're requesting a variance for the parking, so that we're not constrained by the number of employees specifically for parking, and we are not requesting an impervious cover variance because we are not exceeding the impervious cover.
With regard to the lighting, and again, I appreciate the testimony and the consideration given by the applicant with regard to the stanchions. What we're looking for is just a little clarification and being a little more definitive with respect to ultimately what may be considered. Would there be consideration to reduce the height from 25 feet, for example, to 15 feet? Again, the concern is the lighting and the arc of illumination being visible by the residents that are in the rear and overlook. If that height is reduced, it reduces that arc of illumination, if that would be considered. Second, with regard to the fixtures, and I think it was referenced in one of the professionals' reports, that they be shielded so that there is no actual light source that could be viewed by a resident. Are the proposed fixtures such, and apart from day glow, that you can't see the actual light source if you were viewing them from any of the condominium units in the overlook community?
Okay, so there's two questions there. I'm going to answer the second one first, which is that all fixtures that are adjacent to the residents they have backlight control. That answers that one. And then the first question was, just to reiterate, would we consider reducing all of the light fixtures from 30 feet to 15 feet? Is that your
I
question?
think it was 25 feet that's proposed to 15 feet.
That proposes to 30 feet, and that's what's permitted. But if you're asking about all of the light fixtures, I would advise against that because you're going to just have significantly more light fixtures. It's going to be much less efficient. The code permits a 30-foot height. That's what we designed to.
Okay.
You may be referring to some of the building mounted
Yeah, I'm seeing paragraph 15
fixtures.
of the report, 25 feet on the warehouse and on the poles, 30 feet.
Correct. So are you asking only the 25-foot if they be reduced?
Well, what we're
Would we consider
looking at is
reducing
the
those?
stanchions, and if they can be reduced.
Yeah,
So if you could evaluate.
provided testimony that we would consider reducing the height of the building mounted light fixtures on the eastern facade to see if we can minimize the glow based on George Ritter's request. We agreed to evaluate that.
Okay, and would there be a certain height then that those could be lowered to, or is that something you'd have to get back to us on?
It's an iterative process where we actually have to model to make sure we are providing lighting values that meet all the other criteria of the ordinance. So I can't tell you specifically exactly what height we could reduce to.
And again, we'd be happy to work with the board's professionals should the opportunity arise, on any reasonable modifications to the lighting plan.
And if we could just be given notice of that, we'd appreciate it.
Certainly fine.
Thank you, yeah, thank you. In that same context, in terms of modeling, was there any consideration to doing any acoustical testing here? Because of the proximity of the residential community to the proposed commercial use and the fact that there would be truck traffic?
Not by me, no.
To the extent there's proposals to conform to regulatory requirements, and I guess I look at whether it's stormwater or landscaping. One way to approach those is to say that we'll comply with whatever the ordinance requires, but that's not the customary practice. Normally what occurs is stormwater management reports prepared or a landscaping plan's prepared. And similarly, because of the proximity of the residents, would an acoustical study be beneficial here, in particular to better identifying the height of the berm, the material of the fence, and things of that nature? Would that help in the decision-making process of the board?
I don't think that's an appropriate question for me to answer. I didn't testify as to acoustical studies as part of my direct testimony.
Okay, I saw that you had commented in response to Mr. Ritter's report with regard to noise control to indicate.
We'll conform with state and local ordinance, yes.
With regard to the lights, is there an ability to install timers on them to assist, for example, on the weekends when perhaps there is not intensive use on the site? To provide better visual appearance for the overlook residents, so that the light source is automatically either dimmed or eliminated at agreed times.
Is it possible?
Correct.
It is possible.
Was there consideration given to that at all?
I believe I testified that based on Mr. Ritter's comment, the applicant would consider part-time reduced lighting values for the easternmost lot.
To be put on timers?
I mean, I didn't specify whether it be, I think that'd be somewhat, that would be the most logical way to do it, sure. That's like means and methods, but
That's what I'm looking for.
reduced timing, reduced lighting values within specific periods of time is something that we agreed to review with the board professionals.
Okay. I appreciate it, and with the utmost respect, when, in response to the questions, the answer is we'll consider it, it's difficult for the residents who are looking, I think, perhaps for something a little more definite or definitive. So, to the extent these considerations are ongoing, if there's a mechanism to put them in place, it would be appreciated. So in that instance, if stanchion height, that's easy. You just reduce the height of the pole. With respect to the lights being extinguished or dimmed, if there's some feature that automatically implements that, it's beneficial. And I apologize. I'm involved with this matter since Monday of this past week, and it appears there's been prior testimony with regard to the site. And I don't want to go outside your area either of expertise or scope of your testimony. But truck idling and backing. Idling and backing, where the backing emits that very loud noise, the backup signal. Was there any consideration given in terms of the design to somehow limiting that or limiting its exposure to the residents?
Limiting exposure of trucks to the residents?
Idling and the backup.
I would defer to the applicant, and they may not be able to answer all those questions, because again, it's a spec building. There's, the tenant isn't confirmed yet.
Okay. And as I understand it, there's no intention to merge the Berry Plastics lot with the proposed lot 301. Is that correct?
I would defer to Mr. Peck or Ms. Williams.
With regard to the stormwater design, and I noted in response to Suburban's report of April 19, there was a recital on page 6 to NJDEP guidance for the recently adopted stormwater management rules. Are you familiar with the term green BMPs?
Yes.
Is that part of the new stormwater management rules that were adopted?
In March 2021, yes.
Okay. With regard to this project, was it engineered to conform to the green BMPs?
No.
And was there a reason why that wasn't done?
Yes, and I think it's actually outlined and acknowledged in the review letters that this application was well before the effectiveness of those new regulations, and it's also been acknowledged by the DEP, the Highlands, so that's why.
Is there something in writing by the Highlands of the DEP that advises that the applicant does not have to conform to the green BMPs, the new stormwater management regulations?
I believe there is. I don't have the consistency determination in front of me, but I believe it does essentially verbatim say that.
Okay. If that could be provided, I'd appreciate it. And if there was a determination made by the board that because of some of the changes that are proposed here, that there are sufficient materiality to require an amended application or a new application, would that then result in this plan having to be engineered in conformity with the current
I would defer to
BMPs?
attorney. I think that'd be speculative on my part. New applications that are filed now, after March 2021, require that you conform.
And do you know the date when this application was deemed complete?
I would defer to Mr. Peck.
There's a resolution as to that, council.
And one item, and please bear with me for just a second. It was a lot of information to digest in a short space of time with respect to what was submitted and kind of taking photographs of some of the plans. It appeared originally the berm elevation was 360 feet to 374 feet. The berm width was 25 feet to 30 feet. And I understand, and it's appreciated in terms of the response to the planner's report, to extend the length of the berm. But there's a concern, and if we could bring up the photograph. Correct. What we attempted to do is take a photograph to reflect from the upper floor of the noted unit and the location identified. And Jim, I don't know if we need to mark this or it's for purposes of testimony, it's before the witness. I defer to you.
It will be marked. This is going to be 01. There is no foundation for it, so I don't know if the witness has first-hand knowledge of it, so you can make a representation and offer proof, I suppose.
I can lay it through a witness. I think there was testimony in terms of what was observed with respect to the rear of the overlook units in conjunction with the exhibits that were presented showing landscaping in relationship to the building. I mean,
Show it to council first.
Yeah.
Do you have an objection? No. Okay.
what's identified as the association's Exhibit 1 is an upper floor unit in a building closest to the site, and it's a viewscape from the second floor out into the field. Depicted is the existing vegetation. Have you been to the site to view what's there, the existing vegetation and
Yes.
the layout? Based upon your physical presence at the site, does this photograph fairly and accurately depict the area between the building unit and the property line and the existing vegetation?
Yeah, I don't have any reason to believe this isn't a real photo.
And more particularly with respect to what exists by way of landscaping?
Yeah, I will note that this photo is
fairly depicts
clearly
that.
taken in either early spring or winter. It's primarily, like I testified to, deciduous trees in that area, so it is a seasonal screening. So I just like to clarify that.
So for probably November through April, that's essentially what the site looks like, and that would be the visual perspective of individuals in those units, correct?
With no buffer or berm, I would agree, and we actually have a very similar exhibit that showed that, in my opinion, almost identical.
Well, the exhibits show what they show. So from that standpoint, I just want to clarify. The berm elevation with the original plan, 360 to 374, again, looking at the line of sight from the second floor units, and there's a number of those second floor units. The concern was, if that was at 391 in elevation, that notwithstanding the berm, you'd have a clear sight line into the area of the warehouse, as well as that rear access aisle. That was the concern. And based upon what you're seeing, is that a legitimate question or issue on the part of the residents in terms of what they're seeing and what they will see based upon what's proposed to be developed on the site?
Wait, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the elevation, is it 360 to 374, or is it 374 to 380?
The revised plan, the berm will vary on the low side, which is allegedly adjacent to where this photo is taken, from 374 to 380. That was my testimony this evening.
Right. And the height of the building was 410?
410.25.
Okay. Would it be fair to say then that even with the berm and even with landscaping when initially planted, that those residents are going to have a clear view of the warehouse area?
Well, clear view is subjective. As I noted, at initial planting with the berm height, you will be able to see the warehouse from that location.
Right. And if
With
there's
that
any,
location being what I had identified as building number 1 in my prior testimony. But I would like to reiterate, the minimum buffer is 25 feet, and we are proposing 110 feet of buffer in berm.
no, and I understand, and the ordinance provides for a berm, and what we're looking at is the height of the berm. And I appreciate what was discussed as being an increase in the height. What it would be requested that there be consideration given, perhaps in conjunction with the masonry wall, potentially increasing that berm. There's a very wide area for that berm, so you can make it higher because of the available width in that area. And what we're looking at is that visual attenuation as well as the sound baffling with immediacy, because this is going to be a huge change if it's approved by the board for these residents. So that's what I'm highlighting, if there would be consideration given, again, to further increasing the berm There's a discussion about 10-foot minimum planting height with regard to evergreen trees.
Sorry, your question is, would we consider increasing the height of the berm?
That's one item, correct.
So the heights that I testified to tonight, I can tell you, are based on essentially taking an existing grade that's at the property line based on the survey that was submitted as part of the application, and grading up at a slope of approximately 4 to 1, and providing a berm height, minimum of 8 feet wide, and grading back down at 4 to 1. I would not be comfortable recommending anything more than that, especially if you want to plant the berm and have a nice all-around, all year-round buffer. So that's why we settled on the height that I provided testimony on. I think that's approximately, plus or minus a foot, about as high as you could go and still provide a nice year-round screening that's not going to just die. That's
So what you're saying is if the berm is increased another 2 to 5 feet, that whatever's planted there is automatically going to die because
I think
of increased
you would
height?
have risk of slope stability issues and yes, plants surviving on anything more than a 4 to 1. I would defer, you're free to ask the opinion of Mr. Ritter. If he would say otherwise, I would consider it, but I really don't think going more than 4 to 1 on a slope, on a berm like this would be appropriate.
Understand, what we're looking at is what residents are going to be seeing, and if there's a growth rate of 1 foot a year, how long it's going to take before that growth rate gets to a point where there's a visual buffer.
It's, right, and it's 1 to 2 feet a year. Some of them are 2, 2 plus, some of the species there, so.
Understand.
Just to clarify.
And one other item, with regard to replacement, I understand there's a bond that the applicant would put up with regard to maintenance. But if there would be consideration because in a number of sites, vegetation dies, but replacement is not quick in forthcoming. If there would be consideration to the extent that there is landscaping that dies, that there would be replacement within the same season. Again, noting the proximity of the residents, the warehouse use, and that area, which is going to be highly visible to those residents on the second floor. Just a couple of other quick
And
items.
that's, I would note that's acceptable to the applicant.
Thank you. With regard to the roof line, and I know you mentioned that the HVAC equipment might be someone else better suited to testify, but I wasn't sure if there was a parapet wall or something similar to that was going to be considered along that eastern side. Again, just to visually buffer and also for sound attenuation of any of the HVAC equipment that's on the roof.
Earlier on, yeah, I would defer to the architect. I don't think that's appropriate for me to comment.
Understand. Mentioning it, and Mr. Peck's kind enough to note that, that would be also an item for consideration. And then, final item, with regard to the eastern side, are there windows proposed? I apologize, I haven't seen an architectural rendering or anything of that nature. Or is it a solid fascia for the warehouse?
That came up previously, and Mr. Lansford will provide some testimony on that.
If it is a solid fascia, there would be consideration perhaps of offsetting blocks so that it doesn't have that institutional look for purposes of visual observation from residents. And again, some additional testimony. And obviously, if there are lights or otherwise there, all the discussion with respect to the site lighting is rendered a little bit diminished if those window lights are there in terms of what residents can see. Mr. McKenna, just one moment. I appreciate your time. I just want to consult with a couple of folks here. My questions are done. I just wanted to see if anybody else had anything.
Sure.
Is there anyone else in the audience other than from Overlook that has a question for this person? Yes, sir. State your name and give your address, please.
Robert Bruce, 11 Harwich Road, Lopatcong. You testified you're coming here with a reduced building site plan? Building is gonna be smaller based on what you're here tonight for, right?
Correct.
And you're coming here with a variance request for the buffer, I believe on the railroad side, to go from 25 feet down to 10 feet.
That's correct.
Did you calculate the size of the building reduction if you don't get that variance? Do you have that number?
Offhand, I don't have the size, but it would essentially
Was it considered?
decrease by 15 feet.
Was it considered? Well, I'm talking about square footage. Was it considered?
Not by me. In our opinion, the result is that the increasing the buffer on the northern and eastern property, or sorry, the eastern side of the property, is one of the resulting points of requesting this variance.
Thank you.
Anyone else? If not, we'll close the public portion on the testimony for this expert witness.
Ms. Schneider.
You're asking for overlook. That's why I didn't raise my hand. You said from overlook.
Well, yes, you're not from Overlook.
Yeah, no, I'm not from.
Okay, well, approach and ask.
All right, I misunderstood you, Gary. Donna Schneider, 26 Meadowview. Just a couple of questions on the sewer. So Mr. Peck had said that the original sewer plan, your report said that you did have sewer. And then we come to find out you actually didn't have sewer. That's correct, right?
I wouldn't say that's correct. Our initial application advised that, since the beginning, we've acknowledged that we're not within the sewer service area.
Right.
However, we didn't say that we had sewer. There was a report issued by J&T, which is the town's consultant, that said that there was potentially up to, I believe it was approximately 20,000 gallons per day available, some of which was in dispute. I think that's what Mr. Peck was referring to.
Okay, so so there's a report on that you were given from JMC. You have that was given to you guys?
It's a public report, April 22nd, 2021.
Okay.
And it's referenced in our sanitary sewer memorandum, which again was filed with this application.
Okay, so then you went on to, the next sewer treatment was going to be Force Main, right? Going down East Strikers, Force Main, to Force Main.
So both the prior application and the current application would ultimately, the sewer flow would have been conveyed by Force Main.
Okay,
The previous application proposed sewer flowing south along Strikers to the
Right.
recently constructed warehouse where there's a pump station.
Okay.
Recently installed.
okay,
So now the modification is, rather than build a gravity sewer line down Strikers Road to tie into a pump station that's quite a bit of ways
Right.
from the site, with the inclusion of Lot 2 as part of the application, there's an available pump station there that we would prefer to utilize.
okay. If you did not have the pump station in Berry, was that going to be your next plan? If you didn't have sewer capacity, you were going to go to this plan, correct?
Well, we still need sewer capacity altogether.
Right.
Like Mr. Peck said, we're not here asking for sewer capacity, we're just simply trying to provide justification for why we believe this is technically feasible to make a sewer connection.
Okay, because on the Force Main, according to Phillipsburg treatment operator, they say Force Main has an inaccurate meter and much more sewage coming to the plant than permitted. So I don't think that would have been approved either.
I'm not really sure what that has to do with what.
I'm just trying to get, because the first sewer fell through, then this Force Main was going to fall through, and now you have Berry Plastics that you now acquired, and now you're going to try and interconnect with the treatment facility, correct?
Well, I wouldn't say anything fell through. What we consider a better option became fell.
But you didn't have anything stating that would have been an option for you?
I would defer to the applicant as far as whether there's an agreement between them and the owner of the sanitary sewer pump station that was being considered.
Okay. And for the Berry Plastic one, for the interconnect, So that treatment facility was designed for NFI. I'm sorry, for Berry when it was put in, right? It was designed for Berry. So if there's not enough raw sewage, the plant will not operate properly. So there needs to be flow that will sustain anaerobic bacteria to eat the waste. So is that all going to, do you have, are you going to get a report from the DEP? Is that what you were saying in order to get that?
So, yeah, what we have to do is, should the board grant preliminary approval, as part of final, you would have to provide a more in-depth analysis of that existing pump station.
Okay.
It's not that unusual. I've reviewed the treatment works approval, and just based on the fact that pump was designed to convey 14,000 gallons per day,
Right.
I believe, just based on experience, not doing a full-blown investigation, that it would be viable to convey 11,000 gallons per day, or 10,500 gallons per day. Typically, you may need to do some modifications to the pump system, the controls, or floats, just to achieve exactly what you're talking about.
So basically, it seems that though you would be pretty much defuncting the Berry Plastics building, because there's no way, as what they're saying, it just doesn't seem feasible that you can do both. You can have both, because now you're putting Berry Plastics building into a different category, and then they're going to have to try and scramble to find something. So, in your opinion, you're saying that this is going to be feasible?
Technically, I believe it is going to be feasible. As far as marketability, I would defer to Mr. Landsberg. I'm sure they know what they're doing in that regard.
Okay.
And I think people are fine on that.
Okay. And I just have, it just seems that all of what you have, you've added acreage, you've added buildings, you're adding a sewer facility, you're adding a a ring road, you're changing the access road, everything from the original application seems to be, this doesn't even look like the original application, and you're asking all of this to be put on a C variance?
I don't think the appropriate person to ask that question. I would defer to you.
Yeah, I'm just saying, we're entitled to amend our application and seek variances, so.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
John Ketcherson, 38 Jade Lane. Just a couple quick questions. You were talking a lot about Lot 6. What is the relationship to Lot 6? It looks like you're taking a piece of the corner of Lot 6 for the driveway or something?
Yeah, so just given the unique shape of the property,
Mhm.
And this has always been, going back to the initial application, has always been part of the application, but there's a, right near the northern corner of Lot 6, there's approximately 2,400 square feet that would be utilized for a truck court, and then just an area beyond the truck court, curbing and grass.
Do you guys actually have that easement, or?
There was I believe it was titled an owner consent form, essentially, that was filed with the application between the owners of Lot 6 and the applicant.
Okay, I was going to ask what the plans are for the rest of Berry. So you were talking about if we remove that cooling tower outflow, then we have that capacity of, I forget how many thousands of gallons.
Roughly
11,000 gallons. So I guess as part of this, you'll have to re-permit the Berry property? There'll be an application to do that? Because right now it would be permitted to do so, right?
In order to, again, the goal of the testimony on sanitary sewer is really just to explain that this is, in our opinion, technically feasible. We wanted to come up with a plan. We felt that the acquisition of Lot 2 helped to provide a better solution for the sanitary sewer. If the board were to approve this application, yes, it would be subject to, we would have to file a treatment works application to the DEP. It would also be subject to the wastewater management amendment, which is for the sewer service area, which that application goes through the Highlands and the town and the treatment facility, so everyone would have to approve this.
Okay. How you were talking about 8,000 gallons a day usage for the sewer, for the warehouse. How are we going to limit that if we don't know what the usage of that warehouse is going to be? And we have this banked parking out there, which if you guys needed to use that banked parking, wouldn't that indicate a an increase in the sewage usage?
Basically, the short answer is that the applicant would be limited to number of employees within the warehouse operating on a unit shift. That is how the criteria for warehouse is defined.
Okay, so they would have to, if somebody wanted to come in besides NFI, they would be limited to the number of employees that would be able to work there.
That's correct, on a per shift basis over a 24-hour period.
And we talked a lot about overlook, and it is very important. I certainly wouldn't want to live with a warehouse in my backyard. But what about the visibility of this warehouse from 57? It is a scenic, Warren County scenic byway. How visible is this warehouse going to be from 57? Lighting and everything else?
Honestly, I haven't done detailed cross-sections similar to what we've done for Overlook. That level of detail was only done because of the concern expressed over the aesthetics from the Overlook. I think similar, it would be visible, but there is some existing screening there. Depending on where you are in 57, there's some existing commercial uses, there's a railroad, and some existing tree line, but I would say it could be visible.
Okay. And I understand you don't want to go above like a 4-to-1 slope to build a berm and that, but you were talking about, well, the headlights wouldn't be visible from these trucks as, that it shouldn't be visible because of the height of the berm. But some of these trucks are, lit up with these LED marker lights all the way up to the very top of their, the cowls that go up and cover the trailer. Would they be visible from Overlook, the residents Overlook?
I don't know, lighting to say is it 100% not visible, I don't know that for certain. I think it'd be very well screened. I mean, those trucks have clearances at 13.5 feet, 10-foot berm, planting on top, and on the other side, you're at elevation, the loading docks are actually down at 361 essentially, so I think it is very unlikely you get to see that.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing nothing, we'll close the public portion of the questioning of the expert witness. Mr. Peck, as you well know, we have reached the magic hour of 10 o'clock. And it's this board's policy, and it's published that we don't extend past 10 o'clock. So how long?
Given the special nature of these proceedings, could we at least get Mr. Landsberg on to give some of that cleanup testimony about windows and things that were asked?
I'm reticent to suggest that because the testimony could extend. The question is 2 minutes. That's the truth.
How many?
2 minutes.
I'm told 2 minutes, but.
I can assure you it's not going to be 2 minutes.
His testimony will be 2 minutes. I can't account for Q&A.
That's exactly the point.
All right, well, we're just going to leave people hanging there with the
How many
anticipation.
more witnesses do you have?
We have, Mr. Landsberg, then Mr. Witchner, and Ms. Zeman.
So we have quite a few.
Just answering that one question.
A lot of time. Well, the one question is going to lead into more questioning of you, and that can go on for quite a bit of time, so I think we're going to have to adjourn the meeting at this point and reconvene, so.
Understood. So I guess then the big question is, when can we reconvene?
Well, our regular meeting is scheduled for
Wednesday.
25th.
next week, the 25th, so we can extend.
Is the room on the agenda?
Yes.
Yes, the only other applicant that I know of coming in is Mr. Jessamine. And my documents that were presented to me today indicate that he has no variances requested for the property. So it should be a very.
Should it be a smooth and quick hearing?
So, we'll also indicate that you request the extension to go for this hearing to that time.
Yes, so we will consent to extend the time for the board to act to the end of May.
And we will indicate that there'll be no notices required.
Further notice is required.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and again, happy birthday.
I need a motion to grant the extension of time with no notification.
So moved. Second, Samir?
Roll call that, please. Please. We're still in the business here.
Member Finer? Member Coyle? Member DeLeo?
Yes.
Member Polito?
Yes.
Member Sotelo? Member Weeks?
Yes.
Mayor Mangucci?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Sampson?
Yes.
Chairman Van Vliet?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the public announcement that this matter has now been carried by the board to May 25th, which is Wednesday, 7 PM in this location. There will be no further notice. This is your notice.
Motion to adjourn? Motion to adjourn, motion to close? So moved.